Chapter 501, Wotan's Victory over the Giant. The heavens themselves seemed to call upon their sovereign as the stars shone with an unparalleled brilliance and the dragons summoned their king. Amidst this celestial spectacle, golden runes danced across the sky, heralding a battle of epic proportions. The giant, astride his towering steed, was engulfed in flames so fierce they melted his golden helmet, the molten metal cascading over the horse's visage in a stream of liquid gold. The dragon's claws, sharp and unyielding, tore through the giant's mount, spilling blood in a vivid display of power. With a triumphant roar that resonated through the magical world, the golden dragon announced the giant's demise. The once mighty head of the giant rolled to the ground, a silent testament to the dragon's might. Turning to face the assembly of dragons that filled the sky, the golden dragon beheld the fire dragons as they descended, bowing in reverence to their king. This awe-inspiring scene left the faculty and students of Hogwarts spellbound. Clutching the giant's golden head, the dragon soared to the pinnacle of Hogwarts' highest tower. There, it issued a command in a voice that brooked no opposition: kneel down or die. The sheer force of the dragon's presence compelled the remaining giants, who, witnessing the fall of their leader, dropped their weapons in terror and knelt in submission. As the golden head was cast aside, the dragon underwent a miraculous transformation. Its scales receded, and its form shrank, morphing from an 80-foot behemoth to a size smaller than the most diminutive Peruvian viper tooth. The young man who now stood before them, wielding a silver sword, commanded the dragons, "Return to your homeland." Obediently, the dragons took flight, heading towards the valley gate. John, having leaped from the tower and landed with the grace of a feather, greeted the onlookers with a chuckle. "It seems you've all missed me greatly." The transformation from dragon to man left the Hogwarts community in marveling at John's return and his decisive victory over the formidable giant army. Professor McGonagall, ever the master of transfiguration, murmured in disbelief. A dragon animagus? The concept was beyond anything she had encountered in her extensive career. Slughorn, filled with gratitude, remarked, "He's back." His decision to suspend John had been a source of regret, and the events of the year only served to reinforce his belief that perhaps the role of headmaster was not suited for him. John, addressing the gathered wizards, proposed, "I think it's time for a new challenge. How about a group of experienced aurors?" With a snap of his fingers, every fireplace in Hogwarts blazed to life. From the green flames in the headmaster's office, Barty Crouch Sr. emerged, issuing orders for the aurors to apprehend any intruders and, if necessary, to execute them. The aurors, springing into action, transformed Hogwarts into a fortress from which there was no escape. Any wizard attempting to harm a student was swiftly dealt with. Barty Crouch Sr., donning a smart windbreaker, reassured the students, "You are doing well." His appearance sparked confusion among those who believed him to be under control. As a wizard attempted to flee, finding his path blocked and apparition impossible, the aurors, armed and vigilant, escorted the students back to the safety of the castle, purging Hogwarts of the invaders. Barty Crouch Sr., now allied with the werewolf capture team led by Sophie, coordinated the capture of the bloodthirsty werewolves. This unexpected alliance between the werewolves and the Ministry of Magic, bolstered by the support of the Order of the Phoenix and Hogwarts professors, initiated a thorough purge of Voldemort's dwindling forces. John, momentarily lost in thought as he gazed at a woman who bore a striking resemblance to his mother, was brought back to reality by a tap on the head. Looking up, he saw his father, Watson, who expressed the collective worry of those who cared for him. "Where did you go? We've all been so worried." Watson struggled to maintain a stern expression, but the sight of his son's commanding presence earlier had inadvertently brought a smile to his face. "All right, I'll make sure to mention it next time," John conceded with a hint of speechlessness, still reeling from the sheer audacity and might displayed by his uncles. It felt as though he had stepped into an entirely different realm. Mrs. Wick, having dispatched a dark creature, rushed over to envelop her son in a warm embrace. Members of the Quenching Club also made their appearance. "See, I told you he'd be all right," Malfoy declared with a hint of pride, despite the fresh wound on his face inflicted by Bellatrix. Daphne hesitated, torn between her desire to approach and her fear, while Fleur had no such reservations, hugging John without a second thought. Percy, with a wry smile, posed a grim question. "Voldemort has breached our defenses. What's our next move?" John's response was surprisingly optimistic. "This is actually good news, isn't it?" he said, a mischievous chuckle escaping him. "It's time to deal with him once and for all." The members of the Kungsing Club, fueled by a mix of excitement and anticipation, were ready for the confrontation. The plans set in motion since the debacle at the Ministry of Magic were finally coming to fruition. However, John's next declaration dampened their spirits. He intended to face the challenge alone. "Why?" Malfoy asked, puzzled. John shot him a knowing look. "You're not familiar with what lies ahead." Malfoy, not easily dissuaded, countered. "But Neville's in there, isn't he?" John, understanding Malfoy's competitive nature, replied, "Then you can take up your challenge with Neville once he emerges." As John prepared to enter, his attention was caught by Bellatrix, who was mercilessly attacking the Weasley twins. His gaze hardened upon recognizing her. "It's really you, Tom," he muttered under his breath, a comment overheard by Tom, who approached with a puzzled look, clearly misunderstanding John's words. Above, two owls, one black and one white, soared, their talons effortlessly tearing through the dark creatures in the sky. John, observing Bellatrix's relentless assault, drew his wand. He recalled a scroll that detailed a dark ritual, turning people into monstrous beings that roamed the night alongside spirits. It was clear Voldemort had no qualms about subjecting his followers to cruel fates. Bellatrix, though seemingly granted extended life, was nothing more than a puppet, her existence marred by pain and manipulation. "Return of the soul," John whispered in an ancient tongue. Bellatrix ceased her actions abruptly, black smoke billowing from her form as she screamed in terror, feeling her soul being ripped from her body. John, with the Silverwick sword in hand, cleaved through the dark soul matter, effectively eradicating Bellatrix's soul, which had endured a torturous existence. Her body, now devoid of its soul, began to disintegrate. Malfoy and Sirius watched with mixed emotions as Bellatrix, a member of their family, faded away. With her passing, another link to the Black family lineage was severed. After dealing with Bellatrix, John approached a door, grasped the handle, and pushed it open, revealing a maze. Stepping inside, the door closed behind him with an ominous creak. Dumbledore, observing from a distance, was left puzzled by John's solitary decision to confront Voldemort. Meanwhile, Harry pursued a guiding silver light through the maze, feeling an ever-strengthening pull towards it. The maze was littered with familiar objects, including a shattered giant wizard chess set reminiscent of his first year at Hogwarts. The maze seemed devoid of life, each turn revealing more discarded items, from celestial globes to shorthand pens, creating an eerie atmosphere. Among the debris, Harry even spotted a squirrel, a reminder of their past care for snails. As Harry's pace slowed, so did the silver light, guiding him through the narrowing walls of the maze. The environment around Harry began to expand, becoming more spacious as he ventured further. Clutching the badge tightly in his hand, Harry surmised that the silver light guiding him was emanating from it. The deeper he went, the larger the space seemed to grow. After a short while, Harry emerged from the maze into a vast yet eerily familiar area. It was reminiscent of the final challenge he faced in his first year, concerning the Sorcerer's Stone, complete with a platform and a mirror at its end. The Mirror of Erised stood before him, its presence evoking a flood of memories. Before Harry could delve too deeply into his thoughts, an invisible force yanked him forward. Suddenly, he found himself face to face with a ghastly visage, as pale and serpentine as he remembered. "Quick," Voldemort's voice cut through the air, cold and commanding. "Retrieve the Grail." The scenario mirrored the climax of Harry's first-year adventure, where Voldemort could see the desired object but was unable to touch it himself. Turning his attention to the Mirror of Erised, Harry was met with an unexpected sight. His reflection, rather than mimicking his actions, defiantly raised its head and gestured rudely at him. The audacity of his mirrored self left Harry momentarily stunned. "You expect me to just hand it over, treating this like some sort of open-book exam?" Harry thought, incredulous at the absurdity of the situation. Chapter 502, The King of Glass, The Soul of the Remnant. "What did you see?" Voldemort's voice, laced with urgency, echoed in Harry's ears. Harry, however, was just as perplexed. Why had the Mirror of Erised reprimanded him? He hadn't faced such a rebuke in his first year. As Voldemort edged closer to his goal of immortality, his desperation only intensified. Despite his growing suspicion that perhaps John Wick remained unscathed, the allure of eternal life was too tempting to abandon. In the reflection of the Mirror of Erised, Harry appeared to be dancing, showing no intention of relinquishing the Holy Grail. Voldemort, driven by greed, pushed Harry aside and scrutinized the mirror, searching for a way to extract the Grail without destroying the mirror and risking the loss of the artifact. Harry, taken aback by Voldemort's sudden appearance, scrambled for his wand, hoping to catch Voldemort off guard. However, Voldemort, sensing Harry's intentions, swiftly turned and cast a spell, sending a flash of red light towards Harry that left him convulsing. "Tell me, how can I obtain what's inside?" Voldemort demanded, his voice tinged with madness. He refrained from killing Harry, believing he needed someone else to retrieve the Grail for him. "I have no idea," Harry protested truthfully. Not being a member of the Star Club, he was clueless about how to access the Grail. Voldemort, unconvinced, subjected Harry to the Cruciatus Curse. As Harry screamed in agony, Voldemort taunted him. "Harry Potter, you've basked in the glory of being the wizarding world's savior for years, all thanks to my failure." Voldemort's grip tightened around Harry's collar, his scarlet eyes burning with malice. "Tell me, Harry, where is the Holy Grail?" He released Harry, but magically levitated him by the neck. Suddenly, he flung Harry to the ground with great force. Voldemort continued his assault, causing Harry immense pain and internal injuries. "Just hit him 2 more times," a voice interjected. John Wick emerged from the shadows, his presence surprising everyone. He looked at Harry with a mix of frustration and pity. "What did you say you were doing here?" Harry, too injured to speak, could only stare at John in disbelief. "He's smarter than you in this regard," John said, shaking his head. "He should have realized I was unharmed the moment he joined the Star Club." "Is that so, Tom?" John's gaze shifted to Voldemort, who had regained his composure. "Surprised?" John chuckled. "You still maintain ties with the headmaster of the Magic Institute and transformed Bellatrix into something between a human and a ghost. You have peculiar tastes." "You led me here," Voldemort sneered, suspecting an ambush. "An ambush would mean I wouldn't show myself," John countered, calmly stepping forward. "There's no need for such tactics to deal with you." "This is the 4th time, Tom," John declared, summoning the sword of silver Wick into his hand. The silver glow enveloped his arm as he smiled. "You will be defeated by me again. You can't escape this time." Harry, anxious, warned, "John, don't underestimate him." "Silence," John snapped, his patience wearing thin. "You're not yet off the hook for intruding into my Star Club." Voldemort, intrigued, asked, "You prepared the dragon too. How did you manage that?" "Do you need a reason to serve your own king?" John retorted, pulling out a bottle containing blood with an octopus swimming in it. After drinking it, his eyes transformed, adopting vertical pupils. "We should end this, Tom." With a swift motion, John's sword unleashed a flaming blade that sliced through the air. Voldemort, quick to react, waved his wand, sending a burst of green light towards John. John declared, "Obsolete Dark Lord, you belong in the annals of history, not here." In an instant, John vanished and reappeared, his wand at the ready. With a swift motion, he cast a spell that made Voldemort's feet sink into the ground. However, Voldemort, defying gravity, levitated himself, a feat only he and Snape were known to accomplish, without any magical aids. John, undeterred, activated his meteor shoes and took to the air. His wand emitted a brilliant white light, conjuring 3 silver shields that intercepted Voldemort's shattering curse. In retaliation, Voldemort conjured a massive serpent that lunged at John. Without hesitation, John sliced through the serpent with the sword in his right hand, demonstrating his prowess in both offense and defense. Under the influence of his magic blood, John's magical abilities had soared, nearing the pinnacle of level 7. Suddenly, a large dog emerged from the maze, attacking Voldemort. However, it exploded into rubble moments later. The battle escalated, with both combatants moving from ground to sky and back, showcasing their mastery over transfiguration, dark magic, and ancient spells. "I am the king of Slytherin," Voldemort declared, dispelling John's conjured dog with a burst of green light. "I am the heir of Slytherin, the descendant of Gaunt." "So what?" John retorted, his wand releasing a burst of white light while his sword emitted golden flames. "You've abandoned your heritage, Tom, and now you flee from death once more." With a commanding gesture, John caused the ground to erupt, transforming into a flock of birds that surged towards Voldemort. A transparent shield materialized before Voldemort, shattering the birds upon impact. John's sword then plunged into the earth, causing it to crack open and release crimson flames that Voldemort narrowly avoided. Wielding his wand with both hands, John executed a sweeping motion that cleaved the ground with invisible force. Drawing the silver Wick sword, he calmly stated, "You've always been a runner, a coward, Tom." A fog enveloped John, his voice echoing ethereally, "Don't flee. Embrace death, Tom." Voldemort countered with a fiendfire serpent, its flames roaring fiercely. "A fractured soul can never find peace," he proclaimed, directing the serpent into the mist. From within, a red fire dragon emerged, clashing with the serpent. The collision caused the maze's walls to crack, leaving Harry in awe of the battle's intensity, surpassing even the skirmish at the Ministry of Magic. The fire dragon and serpent engaged in a deadly embrace, ultimately perishing together. "Avada Kedavra!" Voldemort shouted, casting the killing curse. "Reducto!" John countered, the spells colliding and dispelling the fog with their immense force. The resulting explosion sent magical ripples through the air, causing the maze's walls to crumble as if eroded by time. Feeling his magical energy depleting rapidly, John heard the system's notification. Magic blood duration has ended. Receive blessings from the Black Lake's spiritual essence, elemental power enhancement, flexibility enhancement, magical growth acceleration, significant lifespan increase. With the temporary boost from his magic blood waning, John found himself at a disadvantage. Voldemort's attacks grew more ferocious, but John, with his newly acquired blessings, remained resilient, controlling the silver Wick sword with unwavering determination. Wielding his sword in his right hand, John charged towards Voldemort. In response, Voldemort flicked his wand, sending John's sword spiraling away. The ensuing clash of their attacks canceled each other out, leaving the battlefield momentarily quiet. John took a deliberate step back, a subtle move that did not escape Voldemort's notice. "You are too arrogant." Voldemort's voice, high-pitched and icy, cut through the silence as he fixed his gaze on John. "You had the potential for great growth. I must concede that your rate of development and innate talent even surpassed mine during my own school days." His voice dripped with disdain as he continued, "Sadly, your pride blinds you, leading you to believe you can stand against me and emerge victorious." "And I," Voldemort declared, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of supreme confidence, "am invincible." He seemed utterly convinced of his impending triumph. "Tell me, John, how do you intend to extract the Holy Grail?" Voldemort demanded, a sneer forming on his lips. John met Voldemort's gaze with a calm, unflappable expression. "The Holy Grail? Is that truly what you desire?" he asked, his tone even. "Use your soul, Tom," he advised, his voice devoid of emotion. Voldemort's stare intensified, but John continued, "The key lies within your soul. Surely, you haven't forgotten the foolish acts of your past, have you?" Mocking Voldemort's quest for immortality, John lifted the silver Wick sword high above his head and scoffed. "A soul as fractured as yours seeks eternal life? You're dreaming." Above them, the dark dome of the sky was alight with stars, but these were no ordinary celestial bodies. One by one, they began to shift, moving with purpose. The 9 brightest stars rearranged themselves, aligning in a perfect straight line, a celestial event known as the convergence of the spheres. Chapter 503, When Celestial Spheres Converge, I Will Battle with the Stars. In both the realms of magic and technology, mysteries abound. As the celestial spheres converge, stars twinkle with secrets yet to be unveiled. John, with a wand in his left hand, skillfully twirls it, creating a closed Mobius loop. In his right hand, his blade gleams, absorbing the starlight. Wings unfurl from his back, channeling the power of the stars into his body. When John opens his eyes again, they flicker with chaotic light, rendering everything in stark black and white. "I have ventured further into the realm of taboos than you ever have, Tom." John's voice roars, sending a terrifying shiver down Voldemort's spine. Suddenly, a dog with jagged titanium alloy-like teeth lunges at Voldemort, biting down hard on his ankle. The pain shoots up into Voldemort's brain instantaneously. "Curse it!" Voldemort exclaims, flinging the dog away. Meanwhile, John manipulates the golden Mobius ring, trapping Voldemort within a closed field. No matter how Voldemort tries to escape, he finds himself returning to his starting point, as if caught in an endless loop. Time magic? Voldemort muses, recalling his own failed attempts to master this elusive art. Despite his proficiency in numerous dark spells, time magic has always eluded him, especially when compared to John's mastery. The wand in John's hand snaps under the immense force, releasing a silver-white soul fragment that glimmers with gold and silver. Clutching the sword with both hands, John's eyes, now chaotic and dragon-like, fixate on Voldemort. "The wandering remnant soul returns to its master's body," he intones, as the ancient whisper fills the air. The golden and silver soul fragment is absorbed by the sword of silver Wick, and Voldemort feels an inescapable force locking onto him. As John's life force rapidly drains, turning his black hair to gray, the power of the stars flows into the sword of silver Wick. The red magic stone on the hilt transforms this celestial energy into magical power that John can wield. "Tom, you cannot escape this strike," John declares, his voice like the harbinger of death. The scene is so breathtakingly magnificent that it captivates all who witness it. Trapped in the time loop, Voldemort desperately seeks an escape. "No!" He cries out, fear of death stripping him of all dignity. He conjures more than 100 silver shields in a futile attempt to protect himself. However, John simply closes his eyes, and the sword of silver Wick moves through the air, leaving behind a trail of soft, silver light. "The soul is returning," he whispers. With that, the sword, carrying Voldemort's remnant soul and the essence of time, slices through the air. The shields are effortlessly bypassed, testament to John's unparalleled mastery over the forbidden. So profound is John's skill that he can defy the very laws of nature with a single stroke. The sword's descent is silent, yet its impact is monumental. Harry watches, not witnessing destruction, but rather a beautiful dream within the Mobius field, turning into golden sand that scatters in the wind. The silver shields vanish, and Voldemort stares in disbelief at his hands. A gust of wind, seemingly from nowhere, catches Harry's attention. He looks up to see John, still in the posture of delivering the decisive blow, his hair now white. Voldemort stirs, and the wind draws a dark red line of blood across his heart. The urge to survive races through his mind, but Voldemort's expression darkens as the bloodline lengthens, signaling his impending demise. In a daze, Voldemort seems to grasp the gravity of his situation, understanding that his end is near. In the chilling night, a figure cloaked in black stood ominously not far away. Harry watched in horror as the bloodline magic that had been their last hope suddenly ceased its flow. This unexpected turn of events sent a wave of ecstatic madness through Voldemort. His mind raced, quickly piecing together the cause of this sudden shift. With a newfound resolve to ensure his survival, Voldemort faced John, his expression a mix of grim determination and disdain. "You truly are remarkable," he sneered, "but sadly, you are mistaken." Raising his wand, Voldemort's voice turned cold and filled with a venomous hatred as he pronounced each word with deliberate malice. "Hi! Ghost! Go!" In his desperation to avoid death's grip, he sought to transform his soul into something monstrous. John found himself paralyzed, unable to move even a finger. The immense power of the stars, time, and soul magic drained his body of strength. He could only watch as Voldemort's soul began to darken, a clear sign of the dark transformation taking place. The sword in John's hand slipped from his grasp and thudded into the ground. Voldemort's laughter, tinged with madness, filled the air as he looked at John with deep resentment. "You should have aimed for my head," he taunted. "Using my soul against me was clever. I'll admit, had it been me, I would be dead." He paused, a twisted smile forming on his lips. "But you overlooked one crucial detail." As John struggled, weakened, and unable to fight back, Voldemort spread his arms wide, his voice rising in a frenzy. "Do you know why I was so eager to start a war this year?" he asked, then answered his own question with a twisted glee. "Because of love. Yes, love." His gaze shifted to Harry, who looked on in confusion and disbelief. "Impossible!" Harry exclaimed. his voice filled with shock and denial. "Have you forgotten, Savior?" Voldemort taunted, reveling in his ability to evade death through a loophole. "I carry your blood within me, and with it, the magic of your mother's love." Harry was struck by the realization that Voldemort's resurrection had involved his own blood, creating a connection that he had not fully understood until now. "That's right," Voldemort said, his voice dripping with satisfaction as he savored the moment of his triumph. "Were it not for your mother's love, and had I not used my soul as a conduit for your attack, I would indeed be dead." The irony of the situation was not lost on those present. Voldemort, who had once relied on Harry's blood for his resurrection, was now protected by the same magic of love that had shielded Harry from him. It was as if fate itself was conspiring to aid Voldemort. Dumbledore was right. "Love transcends death," Voldemort declared, mocking the very concept that he had always despised. "And yet, it is love that shields even those who scorn it the most." With a malevolent cry, he proclaimed, "Eternal life for the devil." He viewed his adversaries as mere stepping stones on his path to immortality. Despair settled over Harry as he realized that neither Dumbledore nor John had been able to defeat Voldemort. Who else could stand against such evil? Driven by a resolve to protect Hogwarts, Harry stood up and faced Voldemort, wand raised. Voldemort sneered at the gesture, dismissing Harry's defiance. "No, Harry took a deep breath, steeling himself. "I want to protect Hogwarts." John, observing Harry's determination, spoke with an eerie calmness. "There's no need for a savior here, Harry. Step aside." "John, you're going to die," Harry protested, unwilling to witness another loss. "You are young, after all," John replied, managing to straighten up and face Voldemort with a serene defiance. "Voldemort, you seem to have misunderstood something." From the shadows behind Voldemort, a figure emerged, challenging the Dark Lord's assumption of who his true nemesis was. "I have never been the enemy you anticipated," John stated, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Your real adversary," he continued. "Have you forgotten?" At that moment, Neville stepped forward, wielding a dark golden sword. With a powerful swing, he severed Voldemort's right hand, leaving the Dark Lord in disbelief. Neville's voice boomed with resolve. "For my old friend, for the Star Club, and for my king." With both hands gripping the sword, Neville thrust it through Voldemort's chest, the blade piercing his heart and releasing a sprout of dark red blood. This decisive blow marked the end of Voldemort's reign of terror, a victory forged in the bonds of friendship and the unyielding spirit of those who stood against darkness. Neville Longbottom, with a heart pierced by determination, lashed out at Voldemort. The Dark Lord's thin black robe seemed to lose its color, becoming almost transparent as if its darkness was fading away. Voldemort was taken aback, unable to comprehend his predicament. Devoid of the magic of love, having chosen a path that led him to become less than a ghost, he found himself bereft of any affection. July's child, Neville, once considered a potential savior alongside Harry Potter, now stood as Voldemort's most unexpected adversary. The Society of Stars, not Harry, was marked as Voldemort's true nemesis. In a moment of disbelief, Voldemort staggered backward from Neville's kick, his left hand flailing open, his narrow pupils dilating within his blood-red eyes. He collapsed, defeated in a manner he had never anticipated, especially not by someone he had so thoroughly underestimated. The once formidable Dark Lord now lay twitching on the ground, his body as frail and mortal as any other, overwhelmed by the fear of death and the helplessness that came with his blood loss. Desperately reaching out with pale hands towards a mirror, Voldemort realized he was no longer invincible. John's words echoed in his mind, revealing that his soul was the key to unlocking his deepest desire. Reflected in the mirror was the golden chalice, the object of Voldemort's lifelong pursuit. With a fervor born of desperation and the will to survive, he reached out to touch the Holy Grail, believing it to be within his grasp. It's close, he whispered to himself, as his body began to dissipate like ashes caught in the wind. In his final moments, Voldemort touched the Holy Grail, his face breaking into a triumphant smile as he envisioned immortality and dominion over the wizarding world finally within his reach. However, his triumph was short-lived. "Forgot to tell you, it's cursed with the opal necklace that killed 19 muggles," John's voice drifted to him, barely audible. Voldemort's smile froze. his hope turning to horror as he realized the Holy Grail harbored a curse far more potent than any he had encountered. The curse, hidden within the chalice and linked to the deadly opal necklace, sealed his fate. Chapter 504, Voldemort's End. John fell backwards, landing on his back with a thud. As Voldemort reached out to touch the Holy Grail, the curse hidden within the opal necklace was triggered, sealing the fate of the formidable Dark Lord. In an instant, Voldemort was reduced to nothing but ashes, his physical form obliterated, leaving behind only his tormented soul. In front of the Holy Grail, a door materialized, visible only to John. A warmth spread through his palms, a sign that the contract had been fulfilled. Voldemort's soul, now ensnared by ethereal chains, let out a wail of pure terror. The sound was so piercing that Neville nearly collapsed under its weight. The dark soul struggled futilely against its bindings as it was dragged away. John, gathering his strength, sat up to face the figure in the black cloak. "I believe our agreement has been honored," he said, his voice steady. The figure, visible only to John, was none other than Death itself. "You are indeed the boldest individual I have ever encountered," Death remarked, its tone carrying a mix of admiration and warning. "The deal is complete, and I shall honor my word," Death continued. "But remember, those who dare to meddle with Death seldom find peace." With that, Death bound Voldemort's soul, paying no heed to his desperate struggles, and vanished into the ether. "Is this the power of a god?" John murmured, staring at the spot where Death had disappeared. Even a being as powerful as Voldemort was powerless in the face of Death itself. It was a sobering reminder of the immutable laws governing the wizarding world. The completion of the transaction signaled the return of old friends. The Holy Grail began to glow with an intense light, and the soul contained within it started to take on a more solid form. John retrieved a bottle of emerald potion from his bag, uncorked it, and drank deeply. The magic that had been drained from his body began to replenish. As he waited for his strength to return, a spontaneous laugh escaped him. It started as a chuckle, but soon grew into a loud, unrestrained laughter, as if he had been freed from a great burden. Harry watched John, whose laughter seemed almost maniacal, with a complex mix of emotions. Neville approached, sword still in hand. "We did it, didn't we?" he asked, his voice lacking the confidence it had held when they faced Voldemort. He seemed cautious, almost afraid to believe that their long struggle was finally over. "Of course," John replied, still lying on the ground, his gaze fixed on the starry sky above. "We succeeded." 2 years had passed since they first learned of the threat they faced. 2 years of planning, of setbacks, and of battles. Now John's usual calm demeanor was replaced by a youthful exuberance, a reminder that beneath it all, he was still just a 16-year-old boy. Neville's face broke into a genuine smile at John's words, and he too lay down, unable to maintain his tense posture any longer. The exhaustion from their final battle against Voldemort was overwhelming. The members of the Star Club arrived, rushing through the remnants of the maze to join their friends. The sight of the glowing Holy Grail brought mixed emotions, relief, sorrow, and hope. "Where's Voldemort?" Malfoy asked, uncertainty in his voice. Jin, tears streaming down his face, moved towards the Holy Grail. The soul within it was becoming increasingly tangible, a sight that overwhelmed him with emotion. Percy stood frozen, while Fleur covered her mouth, struggling to hold back tears. Cedric whispered to himself, "We did it. We really did it." They had arrived in time to witness the culmination of their efforts. Daphne rushed to embrace John, and Malfoy gestured for Astoria to join them, only for Fleur to pull her into a comforting hug. Above them, the stars shone brightly as the Holy Grail ascended, its gold and silver light intertwining. John, now nearly recovered, was helped to his feet by Daphne. "Come on," he said, determination in his voice. "Let's go and bring our friends back." Harry stepped back, giving them space. This was their moment, a historic turning point in the wizarding world, achieved through the courage and determination of a group of young heroes. The impossible had been achieved, a feat no one had ever accomplished before. The members of the Star Society gathered around the Holy Grail with bated breath. John, with Daphne's wand in hand, gently tapped it against the Holy Grail, causing the opal attached to the chalice to detach. He then reached out, touching the Holy Grail and cradling it in his palm. As he looked down, the soul of Heinrich Edgar lay there, serene and undisturbed. They were on the cusp of something monumental. Exchanging determined glances, they made their way out of the Quunxing Club and into the world beyond. Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, the tumultuous battle that had raged between the students and Voldemort's forces had finally drawn to a close. Old Batty, the Minister of Magic, had led the charge, with even the centaurs from the Forbidden Forest joining the fray, sensing the tide of victory. The giant leader's fall had left the giants without a cause, and the dark creatures were decimated by the fire dragon, their remnants eradicated by the strikers. With Voldemort's demise, the last of the undead lost their unholy animation, becoming nothing more than corpses. The war, sparked by Voldemort's ambition, had dissipated into the annals of history with his death. Snape played a pivotal role in assisting the Ministry of Magic to apprehend the remaining dark wizards. The Ministry's efforts were significant, though no reporters were there to document the victory. Old Batty, alongside the uninjured Hogwarts students, waited anxiously in front of the 9 mysterious doors that had appeared. They were all anticipating a definitive conclusion, a real end to the ordeal. When one of the doors swung open, Harry Potter emerged, his appearance catching everyone off guard. Hermione and Ron rushed towards him, eager for news. With a complex expression, Harry announced, "Voldemort is dead." His words cast a hush over Hogwarts, which was quickly shattered by an eruption of cheers. Voldemort's death was a victory for all. Simo, caught up in the excitement, asked, "You defeated him?" Harry shook his head, humility in his voice. "No, it was John and Neville. I didn't do anything." This admission marked the end of Harry's tenure as the sole savior, making way for new heroes. The mention of Neville's name left Seamus in disbelief. He had expected Harry and John to be the ones to defeat Voldemort, not Neville, whose presence in Gryffindor had always been unassuming. This revelation was a shock to many. As another door opened, all eyes turned to see who would emerge next. A figure with white hair appeared, drawing varied reactions from the crowd. Hermione stared, Snape's expression was complex, and Dumbledore sighed. The werewolf and the giant showed their respects in their own ways. Hogwarts seemed to collectively catch its breath. John stepped out, the Holy Grail in hand, his gaze fixed and purposeful. Everyone was curious about his destination, and they followed him in silence. The procession grew, starting with 9 and swelling as more of Hogwarts joined. As dawn approached, John and his followers reached Lake Island, where a boy born of darkness was buried. Understanding John's intentions, the crowd held its breath. Holding Daphne's laurel wand, John scooped up a handful of the dawn's moist soil, letting it stain his fingers. He looked towards the horizon, where the sunrise was yet to break, and whispered, "Today's sunrise is beautiful. You should get up and have a look." Surrounded by familiar faces, Kim Lettisley, Neville Longbottom, Percy Weasley, Fleur Delacour, Draco Malfoy, Cedric Diggory, Daphne Greengrass, and Astoria Greengrass. They all shared a bond of hope and friendship, despite some strained relations. With a wave of his wand, John caused the tombstone to crack and the soil began to part, revealing a crystal beneath. The coffin slowly rose, its contents, the body of a boy, still remarkably preserved. John knew, however, that appearances could be deceiving. Only by fully restoring this body could he complete his next controversial task. As the crystal coffin emerged, Snape's suspicions were confirmed. John was indeed planning to undertake an act that defied the norms of the wizarding world. Old Batty, looking shocked, seemed to have reached the same conclusion. With the opening of the crystal coffin, John released the chalice. It began to float above the coffin, as if carried by an unseen breeze. From it, a golden liquid, said to grant immortality, poured forth, quickly covering the coffin in a radiant gold. This divine light seemed to breathe life into the body that had been ravaged by fire, washing away the curse that lingered within and restoring the flesh to a healthy, blood-filled state. John took a step forward as the members of the Quunxing Club gathered around the coffin, joining hands and offering their most devout prayers. With another wave of his wand, John caused the crystal coffin to disintegrate into dust, which scattered into the air. The body, now floating, was the center of everyone's attention. John made a small incision in the palm of the body, allowing the blood to flow freely. He then did the same to his own palm, catching the blood from the body and mixing it with his own. Whispering an ancient incantation, he said, "Come back, Heinrich." The atmosphere was charged with a palpable magic, as if the very fabric of reality was bending to John's will. The members of the Kongsing Club watched in awe, their prayers intensifying as they witnessed the boundary between life and death being challenged. John's actions, though controversial, were driven by a purpose that only he fully understood. As the ritual progressed, the air filled with anticipation, waiting for the moment Heinrich would return to the world of the living. Chapter 505, Body Remodeling. Dawn breaks blood melds with blood, creating an unbreakable bond. The magic within resonates with the Holy Grail, from which ancient whispers emerge, spoken in a language so old that it remains undecipherable. The blood of the king flows, the blood of old friends boils, the magic power lingers in the Holy Grail, and the stars silently recite the spell of blessing. Daphne carefully removes Ravenclaw's crown, and John, with a tap of his wand, releases a silver-white pure soul from within it. Under John's guidance, these souls transform into silver threads, meticulously extracting the souls trapped within the Holy Grail. "Come back, Heinrich," John commands, his body becoming a conduit for everyone's collective thoughts, transforming them into strength, into a connection that binds the Star Society together. As dawn approaches, the power of their collective thoughts is infused into the blood, intertwining soul and thought through ancient magic, an emotional force as potent as love itself. They cast a gem with blood, soul, and thoughts, invoking the return of the soul. The gemstone radiates light before being placed into Heinrich's body by Johann. The golden liquid within begins reshaping the cursed body, reversing the sands of time, making everything flow backward. Everyone watches intently as the golden flame envelops the body, in which the soul and body reunite. The body gradually diminishes, reverting to that of a newborn. Wrapped in golden liquid, the baby suddenly cries out, heralding the sunrise. Dark golden eyes open, filled with confusion. The onlookers are stunned into silence. Malfoy, bewildered, asks, "Are we to raise him from a child? Who among us will be his father?" Daphne, unable to contain her irritation, slaps Malfoy on the head. Even John finds himself at a loss for words, staring incredulously at Malfoy. "This is the work of time," he explains, raising his left hand to reveal a golden magic circle in his palm. "Good morning, my deputy," John greets the baby. Before their eyes, the baby grows rapidly, transitioning from infancy to childhood, then adolescence, and finally halting at the age of 16, Heinrich's original age. 2 years had passed, and he had returned to his starting point. His dark golden eyes catch the first light of dawn. "Welcome back, Heinrich." John extends his hand. Heinrich, his memory still hazy, instinctively reaches out. As he is pulled to his feet, his body is instantly clothed. Heinrich's expression clears, and a smile graces his face as he grips John's hand firmly. "I'm back, my king," he declares, his voice familiar, his presence reassuring. Heinrich Edgar, the light chaser, has truly returned. Those who witnessed this scene beheld a miracle that transcended magic. And the Holy Grail, now a focus of attention, is addressed by John with a simple spell. "Reducto," he commands, and a charged white light strikes the Holy Grail. In an instant, the once radiant Holy Grail trembles, emitting a dazzling white light before dimming and falling from the sky, its magic stone turning to dust. John, with a casual flick of his wand, catches Hufflepuff's gold cup. "This artifact may have lost its power, but it remains a piece of history," he remarks, tossing the gold cup to a despondent Harry. "Consider it a personal donation to the school for display." Harry, receiving the gold cup, feels no joy. His heart is heavy with the knowledge that Dumbledore's time is drawing to a close, and the Phoenix Order is facing its darkest hour, overshadowing the Star Club's moment of triumph. John approaches Old Barty with a smile, offering words of encouragement. "I believe you will be remembered as the most successful minister of magic in a century." Old Barty, glancing at the Hufflepuff gold cup in Harry's hands, sighs, reflecting on the weight of the challenges ahead. "You are truly astute," he began, admiration clear in his tone. "You performed a miracle for all to witness, only to retract it forcefully. The public destruction of the Holy Grail left no room for Dikar. Aupt, an artifact capable of resurrecting the dead, more tangible than the resurrection stone itself, had been showcased. Heinrich's revival was witnessed by all. From this day forward, the Holy Grail would become an object of global desire, and John, the keeper of the Holy Grail, would inevitably become the focal point of widespread scrutiny. Yet by choosing to destroy the Holy Grail, John conveyed a clear message: abandon all illusions. With the Holy Grail gone, the conflict concluded. Ludwig Edgar, the newly appointed headmaster of Durmstrang, felt the weight of his long day. His elevation to this role was influenced by the consensus among the school's directors and the expectations of others. Ludwig, a scion of the Edgar lineage, which served as the king's right hand, found himself thrust into the limelight once more, amidst the resurgence of Grindelwald and the rise of Voldemort. This attention was exhausting. The Ministry of Magic, suspecting his connections to the Dark Lord, subjected him to a scrutiny that was both malicious and prejudiced. Only within the confines of his home could Ludwig find solace. As he traversed a room, he unexpectedly halted, causing the housekeeper trailing him to nearly collide. The housekeeper, puzzled, followed Ludwig's gaze. They were outside Edgar's room, adorned with portraits of the Edgar lineage, each veiled in a layer of haze, except for Ludwig's own, which remained clear. Once, 3 of these portraits were vibrant with life. Now, only Ludwig's persisted, a fact that saddened the housekeeper. Since Heinrich's demise, Ludwig had not entered the room. Yet today he crossed the threshold. The housekeeper, hesitant to interrupt, watched as Ludwig approached a particular painting. For the first time, Ludwig's composure faltered. "You are back," he uttered, voice breaking as he reached out to the revitalized portrait. The housekeeper observed in silence. It was Heinrich Edgar, his image radiating a bright smile and surrounded by a luminous aura. The light that Ludwig had long sought finally illuminated Edgar's room. Misunderstanding. Minister Crouch personally leads a charge against Voldemort's followers, securing a decisive victory. Barty Crouch's approval ratings skyrocket, heralding him as the most esteemed Minister of Magic in a century. A harrowing ordeal, Hogwarts besieged, revealing the Ministry of Magic's true mettle. Shocking revelation, Voldemort is dead, ending the era of terror. Who is John Wick? The Holy Grail's power to resurrect challenges the wizarding world's iron laws. Johnny Silverhand's mysterious disappearance after committing a grave crime. Johnny Silverhand, accused of heinous acts against the magical community. The news exploded across the wizarding world. As John had predicted, Barty Crouch emerged as the most celebrated Minister of Magic in recent history. His earlier actions, once deemed foolish, were now recognized as strategic masterstrokes that ensnared Voldemort, leading to his downfall. On the final day at Hogwarts, the castle was besieged by reporters eager for interviews. Filch, the caretaker, was seen chasing them away from the battered castle gates. Amidst the chaos of the battle, the fact that not a single life was lost at Hogwarts was nothing short of miraculous. Particularly astonishing was the case of a Hufflepuff student, previously thought to have been devoured by a vampire demon bird, found alive and merely unconscious within the creature. It appeared as though a mysterious force had shielded Hogwarts from harm. Dumbledore had his suspicions. "Is that you, John?" he mused. If anyone had the power to protect Hogwarts in such a manner, it was John, with the aid of his Holy Grail. The entirety of Hogwarts was under the protection of a revered artifact known as the Holy Grail of Immortality. This powerful object was believed to possess the ability to rejuvenate, heal, and safeguard all students within the school's walls. However, Dumbledore, with a heavy heart, revealed a troubling truth. The Holy Grail can no longer sustain its purpose, he sighed deeply. Its power has been depleted. Within the confines of Hogwarts, 2 magical items of great importance resided in the headmaster's office: the Book of Admission and the Pen of Acceptance. These enchanted objects played a crucial role in the school's admission process, as every Hogwarts student's name was inscribed within the book by the pen, signifying their acceptance into the school. Utilizing these artifacts, John had cast a protective spell over all the students, a feat of magic so vast and consuming that only the Holy Grail's power could have made it possible. John, during his 6th year, had frequently visited the headmaster's office. Unbeknownst to Professor Slughorn, his visits were driven by a singular purpose: to harness the magic of the Holy Grail. The truth was, even without John's intervention, the Holy Grail was nearing its end, unable to sustain the immense demand placed upon it. Yet the manner of its destruction mattered greatly. Publicly destroying the Holy Grail, as opposed to letting it fade away naturally, carried different implications. For Old Batty, witnessing John's decision to destroy the source of potential immortality only deepened his trust in him. Amidst this revelation, Dumbledore coughed harshly, a spatter of black blood staining his lips. His time was running short. The weight of his knowledge and the decisions that lay ahead pressed heavily upon him, as the future of Hogwarts and its protection hung in the balance. Chapter 506, Achievement, A Bargain with Fate. Wails of sorrow echoed through the halls of Hogwarts, a stark contrast to the fleeting joy that had followed the end of the catastrophe. The community was now faced with the imminent passing of an old man, a pillar of strength and wisdom. In their grief, they found a way to honor him. It was the least they could do. Dumbledore, perhaps, was fortunate in his own way, for he departed this world clinging to his ideals, having safeguarded Hogwarts and witnessed its survival through the war. The members of the Order of the Phoenix gathered solemnly around Dumbledore. Mrs. Weasley, seeking comfort, moved closer to Mr. Weasley, who gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Nearby, Tonks found Lupin's hand, and they intertwined their fingers, holding on to each other tightly. "How are you holding up, Albus?" Slughorn inquired, concern evident in his voice. As a master of potions, he was acutely aware of Dumbledore's dire condition. The once vibrant hand of the old man was now completely blackened, a grim reminder that not even the mythical phoenix could rise from every ash. A curse from Voldemort had sealed his fate. Dumbledore had fought valiantly to protect Hogwarts until the very end, but fortune had not favored him. Hearing Slughorn's question, Dumbledore managed a kind smile. "Quite well, Horace," he replied softly. "Nothing brings me more joy than seeing the students of Hogwarts thrive." Sirius, unable to bear the sight of Dumbledore's decline, bowed his head in sorrow. Kingsley then spoke up. "The Ministry of Magic has apprehended all the wizards who invaded Hogwarts. We have won, Dumbledore." "Yes, we have won," Dumbledore responded weakly, a glimmer of satisfaction in his voice. "Voldemort is dead." At this, Mrs. Weasley buried her face in her husband's arm, overwhelmed by emotion. Dumbledore had been the headmaster during their own school days, a constant presence throughout their lives. Moody, who had just arrived, displayed a rare moment of vulnerability. The diagnosis was unanimous between Snape and Slughorn. Dumbledore's time was drawing to a close. It was a poignant reminder of the cycle of life and death. "Dumbledore!" Harry exclaimed as he stumbled into the room, his heart heavy at the sight of the weakened old man. This was not the Dumbledore he knew. This was a man facing the twilight of his life, an old phoenix preparing for his final journey. Overcome with emotion, Harry began to cry bitterly, joined shortly by Hermione and Ron, who gathered around Dumbledore. "Albus, I've come to realize that I'm not cut out to be a headmaster," Slughorn confessed, his voice laden with sadness. "But you've done a splendid job, haven't you?" Dumbledore reassured him, his voice gentle. "You stayed with the school until the very end." "It's been a joy watching the children grow, hasn't it?" Dumbledore's wisdom and kindness shone through even as he teetered on the brink of death. His ability to find happiness in such moments highlighted the stark difference between him and Voldemort. While Voldemort would have done anything to cling to life, Dumbledore faced his end with grace. Professor McGonagall rushed in, covering her mouth in shock at the scene before her, her eyes filled with sorrow. Soon, the room was filled with familiar faces, the Weasleys, Snape, Flitwick, Sprout, and even Hagrid, who entered the hall, removing his armor and dabbing his nose with a spotted handkerchief in sadness. Harry, feeling numb, clutched Hufflepuff's gold cup in his hands. "Harry?" Hermione asked, concerned. Harry managed a weak smile. "I'm fine," he lied, the reality of the situation weighing heavily on him. As Dumbledore closed his eyes slowly, the cries of mourning grew louder. His life was coming to an end. Harry, struggling to contain his emotions, looked up, trying to hold back his tears. Suddenly, sunlight streamed into the foyer, casting a light across Hufflepuff's gold cup. Within it, something shone with a golden hue. Hermione, who had been watching Harry with conch as that noticed the change. "Harry, the cup!" she exclaimed. Harry looked down to find a golden liquid clinging to the bottom of Hufflepuff's gold cup. the last remnants of the Holy Grail potion, shimmering like hope itself. A bargain with fate, a wanderer between life and death, negotiating with the forbidden, seeking refuge in the unknown. John, surprised by the achievement blessing, mused, "It seems somewhat akin to a soul walker." As he rubbed his chin thoughtfully, he winced at a sudden pain in his ear. Turning, he found his mother pinching his ear with her right hand, while with her left, she was similarly disciplining Watson. Clearly, Mrs. Wick was demanding an explanation from John. "Why didn't you tell me you were involved in such significant events?" At school, Mrs. Wick's eyes blazed with fury. Watson, standing nearby, attempted to interject, but a sharp push from Mrs. Wick's fingers silenced him with a yelp. John's gaze shifted to his uncle for support. Serioja, upon hearing his nephew's plea, coughed awkwardly. Let me say a few words." "Go away," Mrs. Wick snapped. John watched in dismay as his uncle retreated. "Aren't you supposed to be the eldest brother and take care of your sister?" Serioja averted his gaze. "Sorry, even though I am the eldest, your mother is the real force to reckon with." Realizing the adults were of no help, John decided to take matters into his own hands. "Mom, please, hear me out," he began, his voice tinged with nervousness. "I didn't realize the situation had escalated so much. The truth is, I took a temporary break from school." "You dropped out of school?" Mrs. Wick's tone was sharp, sending shivers down John's spine. He remembered vividly how his mother had once effortlessly subdued a banshee. "It was a setup," John hurriedly explained. "I had no choice but to leave temporarily." "Don't listen to his excuses," Watson interjected, only to be silenced by Mrs. Wick, who grabbed his ear, causing him to wince. "John has just returned. Why are you attacking him?" Mrs. Wick scolded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Watson was taken aback. "I was merely asking, not yelling." But Mrs. Wick was beyond reasoning. She released Watson, who could only accept his fate, knowing well that his wife's protective instincts were unchallengeable. John, having narrowly escaped his mother's wrath, turned to find his friends from the Star Club trying to stifle their laughter. "Stop laughing," he snapped. Malfoy, unable to resist, teased, "You're actually afraid of your mother." Within seconds, Malfoy found himself dangling from a tree, courtesy of John. The laughter ceased immediately. John coolly handed Daphne back her wand, complimenting, "Your wand is particularly effective for that spell." Daphne beamed. "It does feel quite natural to use." Meanwhile, Malfoy nursed his bruised ego alone. "Heinrich, how are you feeling?" John inquired with a smile. "I've been asleep for 2 years," Heinrich replied, eyeing John, who had grown significantly taller. "That's how growth works," John said with a shrug. "After all, 2 years have passed." Jin, once again the embodiment of sunshine, with his golden hair gleaming in a radiant smile, suggested, "You should rest. We've planned a trip." Heinrich, however, recoiled, clearly uninterested. "I don't recall agreeing to that." Jin, feigning hurt, retorted, "I left school because of you, and this is how you treat me." Elsewhere, Cedric whispered to Percy about seeing his brother seeking Fleur's attention, only to be met with coldness. Percy sighed. "My mother had reservations about Fleur, and Bill is caught in the middle." Bill's pursuit of Fleur, who had been ignoring him for days, was a source of pain for him. As Percy shared this, he noticed Cedric and Chuzhang happily together, a testament to Cedric's success in love. Malfoy, having extricated himself from the tree, was about to gloat over Heinrich's perceived weakness when suddenly his legs began to move uncontrollably. The Gru, P watched in silence as Malfoy's awkward dance unfolded, a clear sign of Heinrich's unspoken power. 2 years ago, Heinrich had stood toe-to-toe with formidable foes like Voldemort and Altdorf. Now, after 2 years, his strength was undeniable, leaving even Malfoy at a loss for words. Years had passed, and Malfoy found himself questioning his own strength. "Can I truly defeat Bellatrix?" he pondered, feeling a surge of despair. The thought of being the weakest among them was unbearable. Yet, in his heart, he knew there was one bright spot in his life, Astoria. "How can this be? My Astoria is the best in the world," he declared, his spirits lifted by the thought of her. Despite his inner turmoil, Malfoy continued to lead the Stars Club, albeit with tears in his eyes. Eventually, the curse that had plagued Malfoy was lifted, and it was Lucius who had come to his aid. The year filled with dread finally came to an end with the news of Voldemort's demise, bringing immense relief to Lucius. who was overjoyed. However, not everything was perfect. Narcissa had been admitted to Silver Cross Hospital. The frequent use of the Obliviate charm on her had taken its toll, though, fortunately, the damage was not severe. This act of restraint was perhaps the last vestige of compassion in Bellatrix's twisted heart. She never cast an irreversible spell on her younger sister. And so, Narcissa became the only member of the Malfoy family to have medical insurance, a small but significant silver lining in their tumultuous lives. Chapter 507. I Am Johnny Silverhand. In a realm of pure white, Dumbledore found himself momentarily perplexed. However, it didn't take long for him to recognize this place, a space where the boundaries between life and death blurred. A sense of relief washed over him as he gazed upon the familiar surroundings of Godric's Hollow, a place deeply intertwined with the most significant events of his life. From the blissful 2 months of his youth to the tragic death of his sister and the sorrowful demise of Harry's parents, all roads led back here. Perhaps I can sit down and rest, Dumbledore mused, settling himself on a bench. He resembled a weary traveler who had finally made his way back home. As he looked around, memories of his past flooded back. The post office, the tavern, the chapel, and the stream that ran through Godric's Hollow, carrying the scent of green grass and the dampness of the earth. It was here that he had encountered them. Them. Dumbledore suddenly felt a jolt of confusion. A vivid memory surfaced in his mind, taking him back to the home of the renowned magical historian, Bathilda Bagshot. Standing beside the wooden doorframe were 2 figures, Gellert Grindelwald, Bathilda's great-nephew, and another person whose identity seemed to elude Dumbledore's memory. Despite this lapse, Dumbledore knew he had ways to unearth forgotten memories. In this world, constructed from the deepest impressions of his life, even the memories he couldn't consciously recall were bound to reveal themselves. He made his way into what seemed to be Bathilda Bagshot's living room. Though it should have been shrouded in darkness, the unique nature of this world bathed everything in a pure white light. A chest of drawers caught his attention, adorned with photographs in the most splendid frames. Dumbledore picked up a photo frame, revealing a blond boy with a radiant smile. The sight of the boy transported Dumbledore back to that unforgettable summer. As he sifted through the photographs, each one featured either the blond boy or a young Dumbledore, both beaming with joy. The final photograph, placed in the highest position, depicted not 2, but 3 individuals. The blond boy and a red-haired boy, Dumbledore himself, were in the foreground, with a hint of snow-white hair peeking out from behind them. It seemed as though the third person was shy about being photographed. As Dumbledore focused on the photograph, it began to vanish from his grasp, followed by the disappearance of his surroundings. A brilliant white light engulfed everything, leaving Dumbledore to ponder the possibility that touching the photo frame had triggered this change. When the light faded, Dumbledore slowly opened his eyes to find himself in a room adorned with purple draperies. Madame Pomfrey's voice, filled with surprise and relief, greeted him. "You're awake, Albus." Dumbledore raised his hand to his forehead, feeling a mix of pain and confusion. His gaze fell upon his hand, where the skin had turned black, except for the last 2 fingers. The complexity of his emotions deepened as he realized the extent of Harry's actions he hadn't anticipated. Madame Pomfrey continued, her voice tinged with concern. "You slept for too long, Albus," she said. "Hogwarts ends the term soon, and we were worried." As Dumbledore processed her words, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him back to consciousness. The memories of Godric's Hollow, the photographs, and the realization of Harry's intervention intertwined, leaving him to ponder the implications of his return from the brink. "I slept very comfortably," Dumbledore said, stretching languidly. "It rejuvenates me, makes me feel much younger than I am." Madame Pomfrey, however, did not appreciate his interruption, her expression souring as she left to spread the good news of his recovery. After she departed, Dumbledore's expression turned complex. "Is that so?" he mused, thinking of the third person in that particular memory. With a melancholic sigh, he added, "Memories fade over time. In the end, it doesn't really matter what happened or what didn't." The aftermath of the Battle of Hogwarts was far from concluded. John sat in the Silverhand Johnny store, a newspaper with a sensational headline in his hands. Johnny Silverhand is a butcher. Quietly, he set the paper down, his gaze shifting to Heinrich, who was visibly irritated by Jin's antics. John pondered whether it was time to intervene. "What should we do?" Tang Mishi asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "Are you really?" "Indeed," John confirmed with a nod, not bothering to deny the truth. "It's hardly a secret." Despite John's admission, Tang Mi struggled to reconcile the man before him with the stories. His own boss, a hero who had ventured into a magical school and extinguished its darkness, was now vilified by the international wizarding press as a butcher. The Silverhand series products faced international boycotts, and there were calls for Johnny Silverhand's arrest. Yet, this was the same John Wick who had vanquished Voldemort and was hailed as a real savior. The dichotomy was stark. Endless vilification on one side and boundless praise on the other, both for the same man. "The Ministry of Magic will award me the Order of Merlin First Class for my contributions," John mentioned, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Meanwhile, the International Federation of Wizards will list Johnny Silverhand among the top 10 dark wizards in the world." Tang Mi could only offer a wry smile. The irony was not lost on him. The list of top dark wizards typically included names like Grindelwald and Voldemort. To defeat a Dark Lord only to be branded as one seemed a cruel twist of fate. "Isn't it problematic not to respond?" Tang Mi sighed, concern evident in his voice. "This also hampers the movement for werewolf equality." "The purebloods will become our enemies if pushed too far," John replied nonchalantly, tossing the newspaper aside. "But against absolute power, all their efforts are futile. I'm waiting for the right moment, an opportunity to crush them completely." "Opportunity?" Tang Mi asked, puzzled. "This opportunity," John said, tapping the newspaper. The headline read, "John Wick, who killed the Dark Lord, honored at 8 p.m. Rising from his seat, John approached the closet. "I should choose a nicer outfit," he said with a mysterious smile. "After all, we're in for quite the show, aren't we?" Tang Mi found John increasingly enigmatic, but he knew that John's confidence meant he had a plan. At 8 o'clock that evening, the Ministry of Magic was swarmed with reporters, all there for John Wick. The last time his name had made such waves was when he received the Order of Merlin, Second Class, for his work on the Blood Demon Potion. Back then, he was seen as a promising newcomer in the wizarding world, but in just a year he had transformed from a rising star into a legendary figure, having defeated Voldemort alongside Neville Longbottom. While others his age were still in school, John had become a legend, his story soon to be immortalized on chocolate frog wizard cards. The emergence of a hero, juxtaposed with the vilification of Johnny Silverhand, fueled speculation about the rise of a third Dark Lord. As the clock neared 8, John stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. Upon entering the Ministry of Magic, John was immediately enveloped in a barrage of flashing lights. Despite the overwhelming attention, he maintained his composure, a blend of honor and humility accompanying him. The ceremony was presided over by none other than Barty Crouch Sr., marking a significant departure from the usual academic accolades. This was no ordinary award, it was a recognition of valor. Among the attendees were the Longbottoms, including the venerable Mrs. Longbottom, who swelled with pride for her son's accomplishments. Neville, standing beside John, seemed tense, his attire uncomfortably formal, courtesy of Mrs. Longbottom's insistence on perfection for such an occasion. In a moment of quiet significance, Barty Crouch Sr. adorned John's chest with the Merlin First Class Medal, leaning in to whisper a question that only John could hear. "What are your plans for the Magic Institute?" John's response, equally hushed, carried a weight of assurance. "I'll handle it." Despite John's confidence, Crouch's skepticism lingered. The Magic Institute's prestige was on par with that of Hogwarts and Durmstrang, making it no small matter. The ceremony proceeded, and Neville, hailed as the hero who vanquished Voldemort and born in the same fateful July as John, was next to receive his honors. The wizarding world buzzed with speculation, some suggesting that Neville Longbottom might indeed be the prophesied savior. Following the ceremony, the heroes faced the press. Neville, uncomfortable with the spotlight, contrasted sharply with John's composed demeanor. The interview was proceeding predictably until a male reporter, his cap casting a shadow over his inquisitive eyes, posed a provocative question. Regarding Johnny Silverhand, there are whispers that he might rise as the third Dark Lord. What are your thoughts? All eyes shifted to John, the room charged with anticipation. They awaited a declaration, perhaps a challenge to this new Dark Lord, or an inspiring affirmation of his presence. Any statement from John at this moment was poised to become sensational news. John met the gaze of the reporter with a chuckle, his response delivered with a calm that silenced the room. I am Johnny Silverhand. The simplicity of his declaration, devoid of any hint of aggression or fear, left the audience in a stunned silence. John's identity as Johnny Silverhand, whether as a metaphor for his resilience and strength or a literal embrace of a new persona, was now a statement that resonated deeply within the wizarding community, leaving them to ponder the true nature of their heroes and the shadows they battle. Chapter 508: International Uproar, Reaper's Revenge. The revelation that Johnny Silverhand, the hero who vanquished the Dark Lord, might actually be the third-generation Dark Lord himself sent shockwaves through the international magical community. This twist of fate seemed so preposterous that some joked it could be featured as one of the top 10 jokes in The Quibbler. Yet, the reality of what Johnny Silverhand had done far surpassed the atrocities committed by Voldemort. While Voldemort had targeted schools, Silverhand had gone a step further by completely annihilating one, causing a volcanic eruption that nearly exposed the existence of the magical world to Muggles. His actions were deemed more heinous than Voldemort's, sparking outrage and protests across the magical societies worldwide. In the neon-lit streets of the magical society, protests against Johnny Silverhand were rampant, with threats of boycotting and attacking the Silverhand chain of shops. In China, the Pure Blood faction was vocally critical, sharpening their blades to carve up the resources that once belonged to Silverhand, painting him as the next Dark Lord following Voldemort. They demanded the Ministry of Magic strip him of the Merlin Medal and all other honors. Old Batty's face paled upon hearing John's admission of being Johnny Silverhand. He had hoped for a day when John would reveal his true identity, but as a hero, not as a man confessing to such grave crimes. The reporter from the Daily Prophet, too shocked to speak initially, quickly regained his composure, bombarding John with accusations and envisioning his rise to fame with sensational headlines. Are you admitting to being the butcher who destroyed the Magic Institute and nearly exposed our society? The reporter asked, his eyes gleaming with the prospect of his story causing a sensation. John responded with a light smile, challenging the reporter's understanding of the truth and the nature of magic itself. The reporter, confident in his knowledge, was taken aback when John summoned a group of people, including Gauss, Musashi, Shizuka, other mentors, and some children. Their appearance, especially that of the familiar faces among them, caused a stir among the reporters, with the one from the Daily Prophet feeling an inexplicable unease. John, pushing Gauss aside gently, addressed the gathered crowd, ready to unveil the truth behind the accusations and to shed light on the real story that had been obscured by sensationalism and misunderstanding. The scene was set for a revelation that would challenge the perceptions of the wizarding world and perhaps redefine the legacy of Johnny Silverhand. John faced the reporter and asked in a calm tone, "Do you think the Institute of Magic is a reputable school?" He scoffed. "Are you aware that since Yuan Zhang became the principal, the school has been conducting some inhumane experiments?" With a flick of his wrist, rolls of files soared out of John's compact bag. Casting a duplication spell, he ensured a copy landed in the hands of each person present. Old Batty, proficient in over 200 languages, had no trouble understanding the neon language documents. As he read, his expression darkened significantly, his face turning pale and veins throbbing with anger. Human experimentation, he nearly choked out the words, his voice filled with fury. The Magic Institute has been conducting human experiments. Noticing the puzzled looks from the reporters as they received the files, John thoughtfully prepared English versions for them. He also distributed photographs, all of which he had taken before demolishing the Magic Institute, with significant contributions from Gauss. The impact of the visual evidence was undeniable. The reporters, who had previously labeled Johnny Silverhand a butcher, were now speechless. their eyes glued to the harrowing images. The photographs depicted horrifying experiments alongside the anguished faces of children, numerous bodies submerged in liquid, and the tormented Muggle children whose bodies and souls had been ravaged. These beings were no longer recognizable as human. They were the results of monstrous acts. Among the crowd, children who had accompanied the instructors sought refuge behind the adults. A closer look revealed their sparse hair and bodies marred by scars from years of torturous experimentation. Some had suffered necrosis in their hands due to extreme cold, resorting to amputation with hammers. The undeniable evidence of inhuman treatment, coupled with solid proof and eyewitness accounts, painted a grim picture. Several mentors, unaffiliated with the Magic Institute, testified that young wizards would mysteriously disappear, only to return with no memory, their minds wiped clean by powerful spells. In severe cases, these young wizards were left unable to continue their education. All of these atrocities, orchestrated by Yuan Zhang and backed by influential figures, had been meticulously hidden from the public eye. The institution that Johnny Silverhand had destroyed was not a school, but a den of cruelty that preyed on young wizards. The so-called Dark Lord was, in fact, the savior of these innocent souls. "Now, do you still think I'm a butcher?" John asked, his gaze sweeping across the silent reporters. With tangible evidence, witness testimonies, and the victims themselves, the revelation was a bombshell that rocked the entire wizarding world. John's investigation had unearthed a scandal that implicated not only the magic community, but possibly the Muggle world as well, given the similarities between the experimental equipment and Muggle technology. The night's revelations were just the beginning. By the next day, the international magical community was in uproar. The Neon Magic Society, initially perceived as a victim, was now seen as a perpetrator. Forced to respond, the Neon Ministry of Magic attempted to dismiss the evidence as fabricated, but the overwhelming proof made it impossible to silence the outcry. The scandal extended beyond Neon, implicating individuals from various countries. Leading the charge against the Neon Ministry of Magic was none other than John Wick, formerly known as Johnny Silverhand. He revealed that he possessed a list of individuals involved in the experiments, obtained from the site itself. This disclosure put immense pressure on the Neon Ministry and signaled a pivotal moment in the wizarding world's history, promising significant repercussions for all involved. The Neon Magic community was in turmoil. The release of a list by John had sent shockwaves throughout the magical world. This list was not ordinary. It included names of current and former ministers of the Neon Ministry of Magic, high-ranking officials from the Neon Muggle government, members of the so-called royal family, and even Neon purebloods. The revelation was so extensive that it threatened to paralyze half of the Neon Magical Society. The Ministry of Neon Magic scrambled to contain the fallout, attempting to block the news and considering closing the country's borders once again. However, the pervasive reach of modern technology made such measures futile. The magical community was in an uproar upon seeing the list. The minister was compelled to resign, and the traditional gesture of a 90-degree bow in apology lost its significance amidst the scandal. As the Neon Magical Society grappled with the revelations, Batty Sr. continued to lead the International Federation of Wizards, exerting pressure on Neon. The issue at hand was the human experiments that had been uncovered, a transgression so severe that it crossed a universal moral boundary, especially given its massive scale. John announced that the Silverhand Foundation would take responsibility for the young wizard victims, establishing an organization dedicated to their support. Additionally, Muggle victims would receive assistance from the Foundation to reintegrate into Muggle society. This initiative significantly boosted John's reputation, elevating him to a level of high esteem. The purebloods who had previously attacked John found themselves seely enseed by his actions. Their criticism of Silverhand's efforts and their disdain for aiding those they considered lesser beings were now viewed with disgust by the wider magical community. John's adept maneuvering turned the tide of public opinion in his favor, to the point where even the venerable Batty would have been impressed. It seemed inevitable that John would one day ascend to a position of significant leadership within the magical community. Yet, amidst the accolades and success, John made a startling realization. It appeared that he had been ensnared in a trap set by the god of death. This revelation hinted at deeper layers of intrigue and challenges yet to be faced, suggesting that John's journey was far from over. Chapter 509, Exile, Playing with the Price of Death. John rubbed his eyes, gazing at the monochrome world before him. He sighed, a hint of resignation in his voice. Has the world lost its color, or is it just me? He had noticed the absence of color upon waking up that morning. Initially, he thought it was due to exhaustion, but it soon became apparent that this was the cost of wielding magic. Before, my vision was blurry in my right eye, but thankfully, it didn't lead to complete blindness. Becoming colorblind seems a minor inconvenience in comparison, John consoled himself. Basil, his loyal owl, flew into the room, tilting its head curiously. Riddle, another of John's owls, joined Basil, cooing softly. John fetched some dried fish and laid it out for the two birds. Just then, the third owl, a gray owl named Kiki, attempted to join in but was promptly shooed away by Basil. Clearly, Kiki, despite being a fire dragon in disguise, wasn't deemed worthy to dine with the esteemed pair. Descending to the attic, John found Watson examining an envelope. It had been a week since their departure from Hogwarts, and Watson seemed to have something on his mind. I had arranged for 20 heavily armed men, equipped with Chicago typewriters, 3 Gatling guns, and even a tank at the school gate, Watson recounted, a hint of regret in his tone. There was also an armed helicopter on loan from your grandfather in the Maoxiong Kingdom, but alas, we never had the chance to deploy it. John looked at his father, bewildered. Given the current state of affairs in the Maoxiong Kingdom, acquiring an armed helicopter through his grandfather's connections seemed plausible, but the extent of his father's preparations was astonishing. Setting aside the helicopter, where on earth did you acquire a tank? John inquired. There's an American immigrant, Yuri Olov, known as the King of War. There's nothing he can't procure, Watson explained with a shrug. We've had some dealings. Aren't you supposed to be opening a hotel? John asked, surprised. The hotel needs certain security measures, Watson replied, though his statement raised more questions than it answered. Watson settled onto the sofa, reflecting on the wonders of magic. I thought our house was a goner after the bombing, but you waved your wand, and it was as if nothing had happened. They had convinced the outside world, including the Dursleys, that they had found an exceptionally reliable construction company. The Dursleys, for their part, were just relieved to spend the holidays without the looming threat of Voldemort, now that the protective magic tied to Harry's presence was no longer necessary. Petunia had mixed feelings about the situation, but Vernon was simply overjoyed, even going so far as to deliver a roasted turkey to the Wick family as a gesture of goodwill. The quality of the turkey was debatable, but it was the thought that counted. At breakfast, John faced a minor dilemma with 2 identical jam jars, one containing blueberry jam and the other strawberry, their labels having been removed by Watson in a moment of idleness. Watson, reaching for the strawberry jam, didn't notice John's hesitation as he passed the left jar. After spreading the jam on his bread, Watson paused, eyeing the blueberry jam with suspicion before looking up at John's stoic expression. Was this intentional or an accident? He asked tentatively. An accident, John replied, his expression unchanging despite the clear evidence to the contrary in Watson's reaction. Watson, momentarily puzzled by his son's righteous demeanor, decided not to dwell on it. Changing the subject, he asked, Are you heading to work at your magic company today? In the past week, Watson, as a father, had been trying to understand and support John's unique career path, despite the challenges and dangers it entailed. John struggled with the realization that his hard work in starting a business was overshadowed by his son's success in the same venture years later. This revelation left him feeling aimless and questioning the purpose of his efforts. Meanwhile, John prepared to visit Silverhand Manor, where Mrs. Wick had brewed a new batch of jasmine tea, a gift from Daphne. Despite being from the wizarding world, John found the tea remarkably similar to those in the Muggle society. After finishing his bread, John descended to the basement and used the fireplace to travel to Silverhand Manor, the residence of Heinrich. Heinrich was a unique case in the wizarding world, being the first person in many years to have been completely resurrected from death. As a 7th-level alchemist, John took a personal interest in examining Heinrich, especially since his resurrection involved using an elixir as a base to reconstruct his body. During the examination, John observed Heinrich's remarkable self-healing abilities, which were evident when a cut on his palm healed rapidly without magical intervention. John marveled at his own creations. He had brought into existence a horned, snoring beast through a magical mishap, and had resurrected Heinrich using the Holy Grail to house his soul in a new body. Each creation had its unique attributes, reflecting John's prowess in alchemy and magic. After the examination, John suggested that Heinrich take a break to alleviate the clinginess of Jin, a golden-haired individual deeply attached to Heinrich since his resurrection. Despite Heinrich's initial reluctance, John insisted, highlighting the need for Heinrich, as Edgar's catcher of the light, to take a well-deserved vacation. John outlined a work-related trip for Heinrich, involving travel to America and France to discuss the opening of a new branch with Nagini. Left alone, John felt the toll of his endeavors. His vision, already compromised by colorblindness, was deteriorating further, hinting at a possible future blindness. As he contemplated a comprehensive self-examination, John noticed an unusual circular mark on his hand, signaling an anomaly that piqued his concern. Suddenly, he was confronted by an unexpected visitor, Death itself. Death, appearing as a reflection in John's eyes, chastised him for defying the magical world's iron law against resurrecting the dead. Death's distorted voice conveyed a mix of gloating and warning, emphasizing the consequences of John's actions. As Death touched John, he felt an ominous sensation, and his body began to manifest alarming changes. Golden sand flowed from his left arm, and the magical essences in his right hand dissipated. Dark and purple mists emerged from his eyes, signifying the gravity of his transgression. Death's parting words left John in a state of uncertainty about their future encounters. As John felt his body being pulled away, mysterious traces appeared in the sky, possibly indicating a cosmic disturbance. Amidst this chaos, the howling of wolves resonated, adding to the eerie atmosphere of unfolding events. Ears perked, John's expression shifted dramatically. It was as if he could see the white wolf, a harbinger of calamity from another realm, advancing towards him. When he reopened his eyes, John found himself in an environment reminiscent of the space he encountered before stepping through the mystical doorway. He witnessed the merging and clashing of worlds, the ensuing disruption of natural laws, and the creation of a bridge between realms. A true convergence of celestial spheres, John murmured, taking a deep breath. He hadn't anticipated being exiled, especially not by the forces of magic itself. It appeared his defiant actions had finally provoked the magical world. Faced with exile, John was not one to passively accept his fate. "Since it's clear I don't adhere to the rules, you should have anticipated my rebellion," he declared, his eyes morphing into vertical slits as he raised his right hand, which bore an incomplete task. The Gate of Things sketched a line that intersected with a witch from another world. Was he considering traveling to that world? No, John's intention was to barter this power for something else. Equivalent exchange, he stated, a chaotic gleam flick airing in his eyes. In the next moment, a golden flame erupted in his right hand and a key materialized in his palm. Just a second before his complete exile, he used the key to open a portal to a different space, revealing a massive stone monument within. Clutching the locket around his neck, John stepped into the stone monument. In the blink of an eye, the monumental stone was shattered by the overwhelming force of exile. When John opened his eyes once more, he was engulfed in endless darkness. His location was unknown, but one thing was certain. He remained in his original world. Suddenly, a footstep echoed in the darkness, followed by a woman's voice. "Where is the little wizard?" she inquired. This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in John's journey, one filled with uncertainty and the potential for both danger and discovery. His defiance of magical laws had led him to this point, but it was his cunning and resolve that would see him through the challenges ahead. Chapter 510, 1899, Godric's Hollow. Bathilda Bagshot, a writer deeply engrossed in the world of books, had always found her greatest passion in compiling her knowledge and discoveries into notes. This passion fueled her keen interest in the history of magic. Her youthful beauty, often hidden behind the stacks of books in the library, was overshadowed by her reputation as a scholar. Bathilda, however, was indifferent to such perceptions. Decades had passed since her graduation, yet her past and her habits remained unchanged, with her days mostly spent within the confines of her home. One day, driven by a rare impulse, Bathilda decided to step outside. As she walked past her neighbor's yard, adorned with morning glories, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. The family living there had recently faced tragedy. The children's misbehavior had led to the untimely death of a kind woman. Bathilda had once attempted to befriend the lady by offering her a cake, but to no avail. The family, once distant, had started to reconnect with the community after the eldest son received recognition in a magazine. The family's story was a sad one, with the father having left due to his violent tendencies and the mother's death, leaving 3 children behind, the youngest of whom was ill. Continuing her walk, Bathilda ventured along a stream and into a quiet forest, a place seldom visited by others, where she could unwind and escape the fatigue of reading. However, today the forest's solitude was broken by the presence of a boy. His slender frame, snow-white hair, and lifeless eyes painted a picture of vulnerability that even Bathilda, usually detached from worldly concerns, found deeply moving. She felt an overwhelming urge to comfort the fragile boy. Attempting to initiate conversation, she asked, "Where is the little wizard?" Internally criticizing her own awkward approach. Bathilda's intuition told her the boy was no muggle, despite his surprised reaction and the invisible aura of authority he exuded, which she, in her slowness, failed to immediately recognize. The boy, struggling to stand and inadvertently grasping a thorny vine, asked politely, "If possible, may I ask you, where is this place?" His manners were far more refined than those of Bathilda's own nephew. "Poor boy, this is the forest in Godric's Hollow. Where is your family?" Bathilda inquired, her heart going out to him. Back at Bathilda Bagshot's house, the attic was filled with the musty smell of damp wood, indicating a leak that the homeowner had neglected to repair. John, the boy from the forest, was somewhat relieved to find himself still in his own country and in the company of a fellow wizard, albeit one who seemed unaware of his notoriety. John surmised that his vision problems were likely tied to curses or soul-related issues, pondering the possibility of concocting a potion to at least partially restore his sight. As he sampled a biscuit, guessing it to be chocolate, he could barely distinguish its flavor. "Thank you for your hospitality," John said with a light chuckle, offering his assistance. "Is there anything I can do to help you?" "I don't think you can help me," Bathilda responded, shaking her head. She had acted out of sympathy, not expecting the boy to be capable of assisting her. Given his age, she assumed he was still a student. "Are you a Hogwarts student?" she inquired, noting that the school term had not yet ended. "Huh?" John frowned, puzzled by the question. John struggled to grasp the concept of time as he conversed with Bathilda. "You must be mistaken. It's already a holiday," he said with patience, trying to make sense of the situation. Bathilda, however, was incredulous. "But there's a 5th-year student from Hogwarts staying next door. He hasn't returned home yet." "Perhaps he's been delayed by something," John suggested with a shrug, his mind racing through the possibilities. "I've been on vacation for a week, and then some." A sudden realization dawned on him, causing his expression to tighten. "What's the date today?" he asked urgently. "It's May 5th, I'm certain of it," Bathilda replied. John's heart sank as he pieced the puzzle together. It seems the discrepancy isn't in the location, but in the timing. Hogwarts' academic year didn't end until mid-June, which meant the calendar had been turned back by more than a month, perhaps even more. "Excuse me, but what year is it?" he asked, a sense of dread filling him. Bathilda, unfazed by his question, answered matter-of-factly, 1899. John was stunned. Had he traveled nearly a century into the past? Bathilda's next words confirmed his fears. "Yes, in the year 1899. You do seem quite confused." For a moment, John was speechless, his mind reeling from the revelation. Bathilda, mistaking his silence for confusion, chided him gently. "You seem to have a lot of questions." "Sorry, just one more," John managed to say, offering a wry smile. "Do you happen to have a time turner?" Despite being a renowned author, Bathilda Bagshot had no connection to the mysterious man who had found himself in her company. John, having nowhere else to turn, had claimed to be a sixth-year student at Hogwarts, a claim Bathilda seemed to humor as mere stubbornness. He remembered her name, Bathilda Bagshot, a name that rang a bell, yet he couldn't place it. His memory was failing him, especially after being ostracized from the wizarding world in such a dramatic fashion. Magic must have its limits. Surely it wouldn't exile me twice, John mused, trying to make sense of his situation. He was grateful, at least, that he didn't have to face Voldemort again, as the Dark Wizard hadn't been born yet in this era. Living with Bathilda, John felt lost, his vision clouded despite his eyes being open. However, his magic remained intact. Perhaps I should seek out my teacher, he pondered, thinking of Nicholas Flamel, who would be alive during this time. Yet he quickly dismissed the idea, aware of the strict taboos surrounding time magic. One must never contact their past self or attempt to alter past events. The consequences, as history had shown, could be catastrophic. John knew he had to tread carefully in this world. Any action he took could potentially alter the future, including his own existence. I must proceed with caution before attempting to return, he resolved, lost in thought in Bathilda's attic. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the sound of a water droplet hitting the ground. Curious, John went to investigate, tapping the stair railing with his finger to activate a sensing spell. He saw the source of the leak and reached out, intending to cast a simple repairing charm. "Reparo," he whispered, but instead of fixing the leak, there was a loud boom. "What happened?" Bathilda exclaimed, alarmed by the noise. John was equally stunned, realizing he had mistakenly cast a shattering curse instead of the intended repairing charm. He awkwardly clenched and then relaxed his fingers. "I'd better not use magic until I get a new wand," he admitted, offering Bathilda an apologetic smile to mask his embarrassment. Bathilda, surveying the damage to her skylight and then John's sheepish expression, couldn't help but feel a mix of concern and amusement. In the end, the leak was fixed, and life in Bathilda's home returned to normal. John, despite his magical mishap, was reminded of the importance of caution, especially when one is a wizard out of time. Now John's misfired spell forced Bathilda to contemplate whether her house would suffer further from the impending heavy rain. However, Bathilda took this moment to advise John, reminding the student rumored to have been expelled from Hogwarts that it is prudent for wizards to use a wand to cast spells. She emphasized that casting spells without a wand requires exceptional proficiency in magic. "Fine, I'm a disgrace," John conceded, his voice tinged with helplessness. Despite being the undisputed king of Slytherin, consistently topping the charts at Hogwarts, and being a student of such caliber that even Hermione Granger couldn't surpass, here he was, being led a pariah, the kind rumored to have been expelled. The thought alone was enough to amuse Malfoy to death. In truth, Bathilda's words went unheeded, as John had already resolved to refrain from using magic. Fearful of losing control and causing further destruction, he decided to lay low until he could safely wield his wand again. But his troubles didn't end there. He was also grappling with the dire news that the Sword of Silver Wick had gone missing during his time travel. This revelation added a layer of urgency to his predicament. Without his wand, and now the sword, John felt increasingly vulnerable in a world where magic was his greatest asset. The loss of the sword, a symbol of strength and valor, seemed to mock his current state of powerlessness. As he pondered his next move, John couldn't help but feel the weight of his situation. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with challenges, but it was one he knew he must undertake to reclaim his lost honor and power. Chapter 511. Greetings, Blind Wanderer. John's connection with the Sword of Silverwick was bound by a magical contract, allowing him to summon it with a mere touch whenever needed. However, due to the ramifications of his exile, or perhaps the distortions of time, the sword remained elusive, leaving John utterly defenseless. Bereft of even a wand, he resolved to craft one himself after spending several days at Bathilda's. The idea of purchasing a wand was dismissed out of hand. Not only was money an issue, but the thought of dealing with Ollivander, who had an uncanny ability to remember every wand and its owner, was unappealing. John was determined not to alter history, and in a world that had no place for Johnny Silverhand, self-reliance was his only option. Fortunately, the forests of Godric's Hollow were abundant with resources. Upon entering the woods, John was greeted by the scent of lime trees, a known wandwood, confirming the area's richness. The magical community often defied conventional logic, a fact John had long accepted. Thus, when he, a blind man, expressed a desire to venture outside, Bathilda showed no inclination to stop him. It seemed the peculiarities of wizarding thought spared little concern for the challenges a blind man might face outdoors. John set out, retracing his steps from Bathilda's doorstep, aiming for the woods. However, his journey was abruptly halted by an unexpected obstacle. "Hiss! Something is wrong," he muttered, rubbing his nose before caressing the unexpected courtyard wall he had encountered. Puzzled, he wondered if he had miscounted his steps. A gust of wind carried the scent of morning glory to him, reminding him of Bathilda's mention of her neighbor's garden. Realizing his mistake, John carefully navigated away from the wall. From a second-story window, often left unopened, a girl named Ariana observed John's peculiar behavior with curiosity. Despite his blindness, John sensed her gaze and looked up, prompting Ariana to hastily retreat. Convinced it was merely passing curiosity, John continued on his way, leaving Ariana to ponder the brief encounter with the boy's vacant stare. Ariana's contemplation was interrupted by her brother's call. A red-haired young man, bearing the weight of premature responsibility in his blue eyes, entered the room. The recent loss of their mother had thrust him into the role of caregiver for his siblings, abandoning plans to travel Europe with friends to stay home. His sister, unable to attend Hogwarts due to illness, watched him with a mix of admiration and sadness. Meanwhile, John finally reached the familiar woods, though not without difficulty. A misstep into a stream nearly sent him tumbling, but the surrounding nature offered a comforting embrace. The rustling leaves and gentle breeze were soothing as he navigated through the woods. His alchemical sensitivity to smells guided him to a lime tree, from which he retrieved a fallen branch. "It's inconvenient without a wand," he thought, securing the branch for his project. The journey, fraught with minor setbacks, underscored his determination to regain some measure of independence in this unfamiliar world. John missed his small bag dearly, a magical container into which he could seemingly fit anything. He also harbored the desire to locate an oak tree, knowing well that oak sap could enhance the quality of a wand. However, his unfamiliarity with the area meant he couldn't venture too far in his search. After a fruitless hunt for the oak tree, John decided to return home. In Godric's Hollow, a place where half-wizards and full wizards like Bathilda Bagshot lived, John's blindness made him stand out. An elderly resident offered assistance, but John declined with a polite smile, and the man walked away. Yet, John's unique presence, especially as he entered Bathilda Bagshot's home, did not go unnoticed. The following day, John ventured out again, gradually becoming more acquainted with the village. A young girl, clutching a teddy bear, watched him from her window with keen interest. Was something about the blind man that captivated her, a girl usually reserved and quiet. John's ability to navigate without hitting the walls, only occasionally needing to feel his way around, made it seem as though he wasn't blind at all. Her growing fascination with John also caught her brother's attention. The red-haired boy observed the newcomer, curious about the guest in Bathilda's home. John embarked on crafting his own wand. He discovered a bottle of oak sap in Bathilda's house, which she used for repairing books, and had no objections to lending it to him. The idea of a blind man making his own wand was astonishing. John meticulously cleaned the basswood bark, and using borrowed tools, began shaping it. For the core, he chose a strand of his own hair, believing that, as a human with attributes akin to magical creatures, it would serve well. This personal touch, he theorized, would make the wand more attuned to him, much like Fleur Delacour's choice of her grandmother's Vila hair for her wand. Wand crafting was not a quick process, but John kept busy. An alchemist by training, he gathered potion ingredients during his daily outings, which Bathilda found unremarkable. John mused over Bathilda's unmarried status and her playboy nephew, whom he likened to Sirius Black. He was relieved that Bathilda's home was free from troublemakers, allowing him to maintain a low profile, crucial for someone from another time seeking to avoid altering the future. John was determined to steer clear of those who would play significant roles in the future, fearing any interaction might inadvertently change the course of events, or worse, lead to Voldemort's return. He doubted the Grim Reaper would be as easily deceived a second time. A week later, John's frequent visits to the woods had become a familiar sight to the villagers. On this day, he retrieved his wand, now soaked in oak sap and slightly sticky to the touch. After allowing it to dry in the sun, the wand was finally complete, marking the end of a meticulous and thoughtful process. John focused on the task at hand, deciding to start with a basic restoration spell. The cup that had shattered the day before seamlessly mended under the influence of his magic. Instead of the expected white light typically associated with casting charms, a stunning orchid materialized at the tip of his wand. 13 3/4 inches, basswood, with a core of human hair, he mused, admiring the wand's unusual length. John had intentionally chosen these specifications to allow for versatility in its use. With this wand in hand, he felt a surge of confidence in his spellcasting abilities. The application of a super sense spell enabled him to see in a unique way. Tapping on the table, he released the spell, and suddenly, the entire house was laid out before him as if he were physically seeing it. At that moment, a knock sounded at the door of Bathilda Bagshot's home. A boy, roughly John's age, stood on the doorstep. His blonde hair and ruggedly handsome features caught Bathilda off guard. For a moment, she was transported back in time, seeing a younger version of her nephew in the boy's face. The boy affectionately addressed Bathilda as Auntie, leaving her both surprised and curious about his unexpected visit. Though he didn't disclose the reason for his arrival, Bathilda had her suspicions. It appeared her grandnephew had also been expelled from school, a revelation that made her reflect on John, another expelled student currently in her home. She couldn't help but wonder what was happening with the youth of today, noticing a trend of rebellion during their school years. The narrative has been enhanced for better readability, flow, and clarity, ensuring grammatical accuracy and enriching descriptive details. Character actions and dialogues have been made consistent, and any ambiguous parts have been clarified. Chapter 512, Greetings, Joel. When Bathilda's grandnephew arrived, John immediately sensed something amiss in Bathilda's gaze towards him. It was a peculiar feeling, akin to being scrutinized by someone who had just encountered two mischievous students expelled from school. John was itching to defend his reputation. Did Bathilda not realize the prestige associated with being dubbed the King of Slytherin? Bathilda introduced two boys of a similar age. One of them extended his hand, saying, "Hi, my name is Joel." John, concealing his true identity, chose a random name on the spur of the moment. However, as soon as the name left his lips, he felt an odd sense of familiarity with it. The boy opposite him, catching the name, responded with a warm smile. "My name is Gale." Gale's eyes held a cautious glint. He had ventured to Godric's Hollow with a specific purpose in mind, but hadn't anticipated encountering another young wizard in the residence of his elderly aunt. This unexpected meeting put him on high alert, prompting him to conceal his own name as well. "Joel?" John noted Gale's wariness, sensing the distrust. It was as if both had randomly chosen their names. John offered a non-committal smile in response. The two young wizards, unbeknownst to each other, had been acquainted for nearly a century. John's room was situated in the attic, reminiscent of his time at Wick's, while Gale's was on the second floor. John was busy fine-tuning his wand, a task that required his undivided attention. Gale, observing John from a distance, had traveled across half of Europe to Godric's Hollow after being expelled from Durmstrang. His experiences had aged him beyond his years, instilling in him a deep-seated wariness of strangers and a profound understanding of human nature. He was well aware of the kind of person his Aunt Bathilda was, which only added to his suspicions regarding John's sudden appearance. The timing seemed too convenient, almost like a plot. "You're crafting wands?" Gale inquired, breaking the silence. John, though visually impaired, had a heightened sense of awareness. He had been aware of Gale's presence for some time. "As you can see, yes," he replied casually. "Wand-making is a rare skill," Gale remarked as he stepped into the attic. "With such a craft at your disposal, what brings you to Godric's Hollow?" Gale's eyes were probing, seeking answers. From Aunt Bathilda, he had gleaned some information about John, including his expulsion from Hogwarts for engaging in dark magic experiments deemed too extreme by Durmstrang. What, then, was the true reason behind his presence here? It was merely an accident, John replied with a shrug, clearing away the remnants of his work from the table. My arrival here was unexpected, and I've had some issues with my eyesight. I'm quite grateful to Aunt Bathilda, so you have nothing to worry about. John chuckled, adding, "There's no need for covert tests." Despite Gale's maturity, John was not easily fooled. Known as Johnny Silverhand, he had established the vast empire of the Silver Hand and united numerous factions under his leadership. Gale's attempts at subterfuge were transparent to him. Gale, undeterred by his exposed intentions, simply smiled and shifted the conversation. "Aunt Bathilda hopes we'll get along," he said, extending his hand towards John. "I believe we can lower our guards around each other." Both were astute, and Gale recognized that John was not one of his Durmstrang peers. As long as John's presence didn't interfere with his objectives, Gale was willing to share his space. He understood from a young age that strategic alliances could be advantageous. "Hello, Joel," Gale greeted. "Hello, Gale," John responded, their hands meeting in a firm handshake. John, with his tall stature and blonde hair, bore a resemblance to the Weasley twins, exuding a sense of unrestrained freedom. He was like a golden eagle soaring through the sky, unencumbered by the weight of his wings. After Gale initiated a conversation that day, 3 days swiftly passed. During his time, Gale seemed to have developed a keen interest in John. To Gale, John was a person whose talent and wisdom were undeniable. His curiosity about John grew, leading him to frequently visit John's attic. Sometimes he would simply observe John processing various herbs. The Godric's Valley, known for its abundant resources, attracted many wizards to settle there. One day, as John was busy with his potions, Gale watched in silence before inquiring, "Do you also study potion making?" "Potion making is a fundamental skill for any wizard," John replied, borrowing a cauldron from Bathilda. Beneath the cauldron, a golden flame danced, captivating Gale's attention. "The more I learn about you, the more you surprise me," Gale remarked, his interest piqued. "What kind of flame is that?" "Goblet Immortal Flame," John explained, waving his wand lightly to transfer the flame onto it. "It's a unique flame that never extinguishes, continuing to burn indefinitely." "Interesting," Gale mused, clearly fascinated by the magic. Such advanced magic seems beyond what a student would typically encounter. "Knowledge isn't confined to the classroom," John countered, tapping his temple. "Ravenclaw herself said that extraordinary wisdom is humanity's greatest treasure." Gale listened intently, nodding in agreement. In just 3 days, he had come to see John as someone possessing wisdom and knowledge, surpassing even that of his professors at Durmstrang. Gale, who had traveled extensively through Europe, thought he had seen it all. Yet, John's experiences and insights were richer, stirring a desire in Gale to share his grand vision with him, a vision that could change the world for all wizards. Gale recognized this urge as a natural instinct to gravitate towards someone he perceived as stronger or more knowledgeable than himself. Aunt Bathilda, observing the budding friendship between the two boys of similar age, felt a sense of relief. It reminded her of another boy in the neighborhood, one burdened with responsibilities and without peers for companionship, save for a sickly younger sister and a hot-headed younger brother. Believing that peers could offer mutual understanding and support, Bathilda decided to introduce the two boys to the lonely child in hopes of brightening his world. After Gale left, John breathed a sigh of relief, the potion in the cauldron still brewing. He had cast a supersensory spell to ensure privacy. "Finally gone," he muttered, rubbing his temples. Gale, Bathilda's great-nephew, was like an endless stream of questions. To get rid of him, John had resorted to giving vague answers. John was cautious about forming close ties, fearing it might alter the future. Yet, Gale's persistent probing and veiled temptations left John wary and intrigued. It was clear that Gale was no ordinary peer. His strength and keen interest in John suggested a complexity beyond his years. "Legilimency, to think he's mastered such advanced magic at his age," John whispered to himself. He realized Gale had attempted to probe his mind, but John's skill in occlumency had thwarted his efforts. It seemed Gale harbored a significant secret, guarded by constant occlumency. John's interest in Gale's secrets was minimal. After all, by his time, those secrets would be long buried in history. However, a book left behind by Gale caught his attention. Picking up the volume, John examined the gilded, embossed cover. The Tales of Beetle the Bard, he mused, wondering if Gale had left it intentionally or by accident. In the wizarding world, the Tales of Beetle the Bard was akin to a collection of fairy tales, familiar to most. Yet, John sensed there might be more to Gale's gesture than met the eye. In the world of wizards, the tale of the three brothers from the Tales of Beetle the Bard was known far and wide. However, John was acutely aware that parts of this story held truth. Whispering to himself, "Deathly Hallows," he instinctively reached for his chest, only to remember that his sword was missing. All he had brought with him was a fake locket, and, within it, the resurrection stone. It must be a coincidence, John reasoned, dismissing the idea that the stone's previous owner had sought him out on purpose. With a flick of his wrist, he cast the book aside, scoffing at the thought of giving a book to someone who couldn't see. What was the giver thinking? The following day, Bathilda summoned John. Along with him came Gale. Handing over the Tales of Beetle the Bard, John said, "This is your book." "Thanks. I suppose it ended up with you by accident," Gale replied with a smile, accepting the book. John was momentarily at a loss for words. "I enjoy the stories," Gale continued, "especially the one about the three brothers." "Really?" John responded, his tone flat. "And you? You don't find them interesting?" Gale inquired, curiosity piqued. "Considering I'm blind, what do you think?" John retorted, a hint of irritation in his voice. Gale was taken aback, his enthusiasm dampened by the realization. The conversation came to an awkward halt as he processed John's pointed remark. Chapter 513. Hello, Al. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Bathilda, shaking off her previous sluggishness, swiftly went to answer the door. Upon opening it, she was greeted by a boy with red hair standing outside. He was older than John and Gale, but not quite as tall. John, already taller than most of his peers, had a slender build. Gale, on the other hand, was not only tall, but also had a presence that made him seem even taller than John. In comparison, the eldest among them, the red-haired boy, was the shortest. Bathilda's face lit up with joy upon seeing the boys. "Oh, you're here," she exclaimed, welcoming him inside. The red-haired boy immediately noticed the two other boys standing behind the wooden doorframe, one with blonde hair and the other with white hair. Both possessed a unique aura that momentarily took him aback. Gale, noticing the red-haired boy's stunned expression, flashed a captivating smile and greeted him in English, his German accent slightly coloring his words. "Hello, my name is Gale." John, catching Gale's glance, shrugged nonchalantly and introduced himself. "Hello, my name is John." "Gale? John?" The red-haired boy found the introduction somewhat amusing, as if they were part of a playful game. "Then you can call me Al," he said, catching on to the game. "Al?" Gale's interest was piqued. He blinked, extended his hand, and said, "That's a very cute name." "Likewise," Al responded, shaking his hand. It was a nickname that seemed to resonate with the youthfulness of their spirits. Bathilda watched this exchange with a heart full of happiness. Whether as an aunt or a neighbor, she wished for these children to avoid the loneliness that had marked her own life. This was especially true for Al, who had shouldered the heavy responsibility of caring for his younger sister, a burden that had visibly weighed on him. Connecting with peers might just breathe new life into them. This meeting marked the beginning of a unique friendship among the three boys. Bathilda dedicated her time to nurturing the bond between these three exceptionally gifted geniuses. Al, the student council president of Hogwarts and a top honors graduate, had a talent and wisdom that quickly drew Gale's attention. Gale found himself engaging with Al on more equal terms than he did with John. When interacting with John, it felt more like they were consulting a professor rather than conversing with a peer. In the days that followed, the mutual attraction between two equally talented minds blossomed into friendship. Al and Gale became close friends, while John continued to immerse himself in his potion studies. When he dripped the black liquid into his eyes, John experienced a discomforting soreness, but it was accompanied by a faint glimmer of light piercing through the darkness. "The next step is addressing the soul's defect," John mused, understanding the nature of his affliction. The overwhelming magical power was blinding his eyes, and the best solution seemed to be allowing that power to dissipate on its own. The punishment of magic, John sighed, reflecting on his situation. That god of death really doesn't play fair. It seemed to John that even when transactions were made in good faith, there was always a catch. He had come to realize that death, much like one of the three brothers from the tales, would always find a way to undermine those he dealt with. In essence, death was an unreasonably stingy entity. After leaving the attic with some of his vision restored, transitioning from darkness to a blur, John descended the stairs. Bathilda, upon seeing him, sighed, "John, I think you should join them." Among the three, John seemed the odd one out, but it wasn't something he could be blamed for, given their age differences. John responded with a light smile, "Miss Bathilda, power brings many things into one's life. Wealth and influence are merely byproducts. Friends and followers naturally gravitate towards you." Bathilda paused, taken aback. "Is that your belief?" "Power comes first," John affirmed with a polite bow and a smile. "It's the principle I've always lived by." Bathilda was momentarily lost in thought, realizing that her grandnephew, too, was a seeker of power. After their conversation, John stepped out of Bathilda's house and ventured into the streets of Godric's Hollow. He had mastered the art of navigating the area without the use of magic. Unbeknownst to him, as Gale and Al left together, Ariana, who had stayed behind, quietly slipped out of the house. John made his way to the stream, and as he walked, he pondered the connections forming among them, unaware of the unfolding events back at Bathilda's house. John's gaze was persistently followed, an unshakable presence behind him. "Hello," he called out, offering a friendly smile. "How may I assist you?" Emerging from the shadows, a girl clutching a teddy bear approached him. She resembled a child lost in her own world, her head bowed, refusing to speak. John could barely make out her features. Despite his inquiry being met with silence, he pressed on. After covering some distance, John felt a nagging headache. Glancing back, he noticed the girl still trailing him under the harsh summer sun. With a sense of obligation, he asked again, "Is there something you need from me?" At his question, the girl, Ariana, recoiled like a scared child but remained mute. Feeling a mix of helplessness and concern, John continued his journey. He approached a stream, a minor obstacle for a blind man, but trivial for one versed in magic. With a flick of his wand, he cast the senses charm, enhancing his perception of his surroundings to an extraordinary degree. He noticed the girl halt at the stream's edge. A wave of fear and hesitation emanated from her, suggesting a fear of water. John, sensing her distress, offered assistance. "Do you need help crossing?" Still, she did not respond. This time, John didn't walk away. He sensed a powerful magical aura around her, indicating she was no ordinary witch. This realization prompted him to cross back and approach her gently. "Would you like to cross?" he asked softly, extending his wand towards her. Despite the blurred vision, he could sense her reluctance to be touched. Ariana, after a moment of hesitation, lightly grasped the wand's tip. Leading the way, John stepped into the water, but soon felt the wand's end go slack as Ariana released it and fled in the opposite direction. Watching her disappearing figure, John accepted her decision to leave and turned his attention to the surrounding woods. There, he encountered a kappa, a creature native to Asia, mysteriously present in Godric's Hollow. Knowing the kappa posed no immediate threat without anyone nearby, he let the creature go, pondering its potential danger to others. Later, by the stream, John saw two boys playing, a scene of innocent joy. Choosing to respect their privacy, he moved on, contemplating his stay in Godric's Hollow. He realized Bathilda, his host, was a recluse, rarely venturing outside. This prompted John to consider ways to earn money discreetly, to avoid altering the future. He thought about selling potions, a venture that required a trip to Diagon Alley, but hesitated, wary of the implications. Reflecting on his past as Johnny Yinsho, a figure of considerable influence in Nocturne Alley, he mused over the potential of creating the Philosopher's Stone. Such an endeavor, however, was reserved for the most skilled alchemists and carried the risk of changing the future even further. John's actions were severely limited. He couldn't use the Philosopher's Stone or interact extensively with the wizarding community. As he walked past his neighbor's house, he noticed something unusual. The usual observer was nowhere to be seen. Puzzled but undeterred, John entered Bathilda's house and set aside his concerns for the moment. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room, Ariana huddled in fear, clutching her stuffed animal tightly. Visions of a harrowing experience flashed before her eyes, 3 boys tormenting her, forcing her into the water. She was petrified, and as her fear escalated, objects in the room began to tremble with her growing panic. Albus, her elder brother, sensed the disturbance as soon as he returned home. Without a moment's hesitation, he rushed to Ariana's side, his heart heavy with concern. "It's okay, Ariana," he soothed, wrapping his arms around her in a protective embrace. As he held her, the chaos in the room subsided, and the trembling objects stilled. A wave of exhaustion washed over Albus, and the joy he had felt from making a new friend, Gellert, was overshadowed by his sister's distress. In that moment, Albus felt like a bird with clipped wings, grounded and unable to soar alongside his newfound companion. The weight of his sister's condition and the responsibility he felt towards her anchored him firmly to the ground, dampening the spirits of what should have been a joyous occasion. Chapter 514. Hello, Ariana. You should come with us, Gale said enticingly, extending an invitation to John. It would be quite the adventure. He's a fascinating individual, Gale continued, admiration evident in his tone, brimming with intelligence. Unfortunately, intelligence isn't my sole pursuit, John replied with a lightness in his voice, a hint of humor underlying his words. After all, the Sorting Hat didn't see fit to mention any Ravenclaw qualities in me. Power is my primary concern. Gale nodded in agreement, picking up on John's sentiment. Indeed, power is paramount. This magical world is in dire need of change. Gale was ambitious, a trait that often manifested like a venomous poison, constantly seeking to spread his ideologies. However, in John's presence, Gale felt a rare sense of kinship. Their shared belief in the supremacy of power resonated, albeit with differing visions. Gale dreamed of a world where wizards ruled over muggles, while John believed in the natural order of the strong ruling over the weak. Gale hoped to enlist John in his grand scheme for the greater good, a vision that also captivated another talented but family-restrained boy, Al. Yet John had no interest in what he considered mere child's play. Your vision is intriguing, Gale, but changing the world requires more than just words, John said dismissively, waving his wand to neatly pack his belongings into boxes. Gale, unable to sway John, conceded, "Well, I believe Al would be delighted to see you. We're heading to the church today." After Gale's departure, John took a moment to administer homemade eye drops, which caused his eyes to dry and burn painfully. With a few blinks, his normally dull eyes briefly transformed into vertical pupils before returning to normal. Reflecting on the passage of time, John noted it had been nearly a month since his arrival. Time travel imposed a significant toll on the body, a burden he was acutely aware of, though his extended lifespan mitigated the effects. Greeting Bathilda, John made his way to the woods, aware of the increased surveillance since his last visit. As usual, his follower halted at the stream, and this time, John confronted her. "Are you going to continue?" he asked. Ariana hesitated at the stream's edge, her emotions palpable to John. Recognizing her instability, he offered a gentler approach. "If you wish to cross, let me assist you," John proposed, sensing her desire. Ariana, though hesitant, nodded slightly. John, without making physical contact, drew his basewood wand and directed it towards the stream. "If water frightens you, let it part for us," he declared, and with a flick of his wand, the stream obediently split, revealing a dry path. "Take hold of my wand, and I'll guide you across," John offered, extending his wand towards Ariana. With tentative courage, Ariana grasped the wand's tip, and together they stepped onto the dry riverbed. John, patient and encouraging, advised, "Watch for stones." Ariana clung to the wand, her grip tightening with each step, her fear and unease palpable. "It's okay, just hold on tight," John reassured, choosing not to withdraw his wand and allowing Ariana to maintain her hold. Together, they walked across the stream, John's patience and kindness a guiding light for the frightened girl. In the dense woods, John frequently had to stoop to pick up various herbs, bringing them close to his nose for a careful sniff. Trailing a little behind him was Ariana, whose presence he was aware of but didn't mind. However, her sudden stops were a bit of an inconvenience, forcing John to halt his steps as well. Ariana seemed captivated by the natural world around them, her gaze following the birds perched on branches, the rabbits darting out from the bushes, and the squirrels clutching nuts in their tiny paws. Their journey was punctuated by these pauses, and as the day warmed, they found themselves at the bank of a stream once more. The stream John had previously parted with a flick of his wand had returned to its natural flow, necessitating another magical intervention. John glanced at Ariana, who was gripping her wand tightly, and said with patience, "I need to stop the water flow again." Despite his explanation, Ariana refused to release her wand, as if needing it for emotional support. John felt a headache coming on, realizing the trouble he had inadvertently brought upon himself. Ariana's mood was fragile, and he feared that forcing the wand from her grip might trigger a panic attack, or worse. Extending his hand towards her, John offered, "If you're afraid, you can hold my hand instead." Ariana hesitated before slowly releasing her wand and lightly touching John's hand, her fingers barely wrapping around his little finger. This small gesture seemed to calm her anxiety. With a smile, John used his wand to part the stream once again, and they crossed over, Ariana's mood noticeably more stable. Upon reaching the other side, Ariana did not let go of John's hand, leaving him no choice but to lead her back home. They arrived at a courtyard fragrant with the scent of morning glories, where Ariana finally released his hand and entered the house. John, meanwhile, headed to Bathilda's house next door, unaware of the anxiety his absence had caused Al. Al had spent his day with Gale, a friend who brought a rare smile to his face, a stark contrast to the gloom of his home life. Gale was captivating, sharing many interests with Al, including magic and family matters. Their conversation often touched upon Ariana, Al's sister, who was both a source of frustration and a responsibility he couldn't ignore. Upon returning home and discovering Ariana missing, Al was seized by panic, his mind racing with fears for her safety. Ariana's instability had already led to tragedy once, when she lost control and accidentally killed their mother. Frantically searching for Ariana, Al was on the verge of leaving the house when he saw her returning. His initial impulse to scold her vanished at the sight of her face, which seemed brighter than usual. Noticing her mud-covered shoes, Al gently inquired, "Have you been to the stream, Ariana?" Her nod surprised him, given her long-standing fear of water, a fear rooted in a traumatic incident. Al recognized this as a positive development, a sign that Ariana was beginning to open up. However, he couldn't help but feel frustrated with himself for letting her out of his sight, especially to a place that held such fear for her. The thought of what might have happened filled him with dread. As these thoughts swirled in his mind, Ariana quietly retreated to her room, leaving Al to ponder the delicate balance of protecting her while allowing her the freedom to heal. Gazing out of the window, she harbored a faint hope in her heart, while eagerly anticipating the moment the white-haired boy would pass by the door. Meanwhile, John found himself being whisked away by Gale. Despite John's reluctance, Gale was not one to easily give up on persuading others to join his plans. John attempted to decline, but Gale, ever the persuasive force, managed to convince Bathilda by explaining that he was merely taking John and the unfortunate Al for a brief visit next door. Bathilda consented, allowing them to enjoy themselves. In a gesture of thanks to his elderly aunt, Gale flashed a triumphant eyebrow raise at John, as if to say, "See, resistance is futile." However, Gale seemed to overlook the fact that John was blind, rendering his smug gesture unnoticed by John. Left with no alternative, John reluctantly followed Gale out of the attic, handing him The Tales of Beetle the Bard, a book that had recently found its way into his room as they departed. Their destination was the neighbor's house, but Al was hesitant to leave, still troubled by an incident involving his sister. His family consisted of just the two of them, with his sister being ill. Undeterred, Gale led the way to Al's house. Upon entering the yard, they were greeted by the fragrant blend of morning glory and other flowers. It was here, amidst the floral scents, that John encountered the red-haired Al for the second time. Chapter 515, Hello, Deathly Hallows. Al was overjoyed to see Gale, and upon noticing John, he extended a warm welcome. It was John's first visit to the house adorned with morning glories. Al led them to the attic, which served as his personal sanctuary. The sunlight filtering through the attic windows wasn't new to Gale, who had spent several nights here, sharing the same bed with Al, bonding over shared experiences. John's curiosity was piqued by a book on the desk, and as he flipped through it, Al, with a sense of pride, explained, "This is an article from Transfiguration Today. I had my papers published there during my school days." His statement was followed by a question, tinged with uncertainty. "Are you also a Hogwarts student?" It was clear that Al had learned of John's identity as a Hogwarts student, but he had no recollection of ever seeing John at school. Given that Al had already graduated, and considering John's age, he deduced John was 2 years his junior. "I'm a 6th-year student at Hogwarts," John replied, closing the book with a light chuckle. "It's impossible to know everyone from all 4 houses." Al scrutinized John, searching for a hint of familiarity. John, maintaining his composure, shared, "The Slytherin common room offers a view of the giant squid in the Black Lake, but it's the mermaids that enjoy startling students. A friend of mine has been frightened on more than one occasion." Al's suspicions about John's identity began to dissipate with these words. Such details were known only to those who had truly experienced Slytherin House. The fact that Al didn't recognize John wasn't surprising, considering the historical rivalry and lack of interaction between Slytherin and Gryffindor. With the matter of John's identity settled, Al turned his attention to the day's agenda, entertaining his sister with a puppet show, a performance that promised to delight children. As friends of Al, John and Gale were invited to partake in the experience. Al, a master of transfiguration, effortlessly brought a box of Muggle dolls to life, and the puppets began their performance on the makeshift stage. Al called out to his sister, Ariana. Ariana, aware of the planned puppet show, approached, though she remained indifferent to Gale's presence. However, upon seeing John, her reaction was different. Al made the introductions. "This is my sister, Ariana, and this is Gale, a guest in our home, and this is John." "John," Ariana echoed, surprising Al by breaking her usual silence. She stared at John, then hugged her doll closer. John greeted her with a smile. "Hello, Ariana." She took a seat next to her brother, and Al, feeling a mix of emotions, began the puppet show. The story chosen for Ariana was The Tale of the Three Brothers, from The Tales of Beetle the Bard. As a child, Al had dreamt of possessing the invisibility cloak, believing it would allow him to undertake adventures without his parents' knowledge. As he grew older, his desire for the cloak remained, but his reasons shifted. He now wished for the cloak to protect Ariana, whose condition had worsened over time, necessitating the use of protective magic to prevent her uncontrolled magical outbursts from causing destruction. The ordinary invisibility cloaks, rendered useless by magical interference, were no match for Ariana's power. Al knew the tale of the three brothers was just a story, yet he couldn't help but ponder the other magical artifacts mentioned: the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Invisibility Cloak. Each held an allure of its own. As the puppet show unfolded, depicting the story of the three brothers and their encounter with death, Ariana watched intently, her brother observing her reactions closely, his wand movements becoming more deliberate. Gale, too, was captivated by the story, his eyes gleaming with ambition at the mention of the Deathly Hallows. "Deathly Hallows," he whispered under his breath. John watched the scene unfold, equally engrossed in the tale that bridged the gap between legend and their own Ives. John, a man of few words but profound insight, found himself in a peculiar situation. Despite his near blindness, he was able to watch a puppet show through the use of a super sensation charm and telekinetic spells. The show depicted the legend of the three brothers, a story that resonated deeply with John. Not only did he possess the Resurrection Stone, but he had also been classmates with the owner of the Invisibility Cloak and had witnessed the change of ownership of the Elder Wand. Gale, a keen observer of human nature, sensed Al's longing for the Invisibility Cloak. "Yeah, who wouldn't want that?" Al replied nonchalantly when asked. Gale then turned to John, inquiring about his desires. John, already in possession of the Resurrection Stone, expressed his interest in the Elder Wand. He had seen its power firsthand when Dumbledore wielded it, and was intrigued by its potential to amplify his own abilities. However, the Elder Wand had ultimately fallen into Grindelwald's hands, leaving John to ponder the possibilities of acquiring it through other means. Gale, ambitious and cunning, revealed his desire for the Resurrection Stone, envisioning it as a tool to raise a formidable army. The three friends, each with their own aspirations, resembled the three brothers from the legend in their unique ways, the eldest's strength, the middle's ambition, and the youngest's humility. John, skeptical of the legend's reality, dismissed it as mere fiction. However, Gale challenged this notion with a sly smile, hinting at the possibility of acquiring one of the Deathly Hallows that very night. This revelation sent a wave of excitement and tension through the group, especially Al, who was taken aback by Gale's audacious plan. Gale revealed a chain with the Deathly Hallows symbol, indicating his intention to seek out Ignotus Peverell's invisibility cloak in Godric's Hollow. The news was so astonishing that it momentarily halted the puppet show, leaving the audience in suspense. John, ever composed, resumed the performance, bringing the story to its conclusion with the youngest brother's escape from death. Al, still processing the information, echoed John's earlier sentiment that it was just a story. Gale, however, insisted on the historical significance of the Elder Wand and its bloody legacy, suggesting that the existence of one Hallow implied the reality of the others. As the conversation turned to the invisibility cloak, John offered a pragmatic perspective. He knew its limitations and whereabouts, understanding that its power was not as formidable as legend suggested. This knowledge, coupled with his own experiences, shaped John's cautious approach to the pursuit of the Deathly Hallows, contrasting with Gale's ambition and Al's curiosity. With a casual tone tinged with disbelief, Gale asked, "Aren't you excited?" The tale of the three brothers had just concluded. John, with a slight curl of his lips, set his wand aside and tapped it against his head. In an instant, as if vanishing into thin air, John's figure disappeared from view under the watchful eyes of the two onlookers. "What's the use of a disillusionment charm when you still need an invisibility cloak?" John remarked with a hint of disdain. The charm, he explained, didn't render one completely invisible, but rather acted more like optical camouflage, blending the user into their surroundings. However, John's mastery over the disillusionment charm was exceptional. Upon casting it, he vanished entirely from sight, leaving his companions in awe. It was then that John realized the true reason behind Gale's insistence on having him there. Gale had hoped to use the story as a means to entice John into joining a grander scheme, one that purportedly aimed at changing the world. "Invisibility is not the same as disappearing," John stated calmly, breaking the silence that had fallen over them. "In my view, the invisibility cloak doesn't hold a candle to the power of the Elder Wand. Strength is the cornerstone upon which a person's life is built." Gale's initial enthusiasm seemed to diminish slightly in the face of John's pragmatic outlook. The conversation had taken a turn, leading them into a deeper reflection on the values and tools that truly shape the course of one's destiny. Chapter 516. A New Understanding. Al was jolted awake by John's probing question. "Is the freedom granted by the invisibility cloak truly liberating?" John inquired, his gaze fixed on Al, who appeared perplexed. Glancing at his sister Ariana, Al found himself grappling with doubt. The narrative of the third sibling ensnared by the cloak's allure for a lifetime loomed over him. John extended his hand, his vision blurring as he contemplated the Elder Wand's true nature. "The Elder Wand symbolizes victory and power, but that's a misconception," he mused. "If it truly bestowed invincibility, it wouldn't have changed hands so frequently. The true essence of magic is to amplify one's strength." Under their watchful eyes, a golden flame erupted in John's palm, morphing into a majestic fire dragon. In that moment, Gale realized John's distinctiveness. While he himself was akin to a golden eagle, soaring with ambition, John embodied a dragon, his fangs bared, yearning for a power that could engulf everything. Ariana, drawn by curiosity, cautiously reached out to the fire dragon, which extinguished upon her touch. "Where did you discover this?" John queried, turning to Gale, who was visibly taken aback. John's fascination with the tale of the three brothers, particularly the characters who transcended legend to become reality, was evident. His interest in Ignotus Peverell stemmed from a personal aversion to death. Having faced death himself, John found it peculiar that death, portrayed as a miser in the tale, hadn't sought vengeance for being outwitted. Gale shared his knowledge of a church cemetery housing Ignotus Peverell's tomb. Intrigued, John shrugged. "Sounds intriguing. Count me in." With John's participation, Gale turned to Al, sensing his hesitation. The prospect of an exhilarating adventure with friends was tempting, yet the idea of visiting a grave stirred unease. "Are you scared?" Gale teased, challenging Al's Gryffindor bravery. Al, spurred by the provocation, agreed to the nocturnal expedition. John found the situation amusing. A group of wizards venturing into grave robbing? Yet their intent was merely to observe, not to desecrate. Al noticed Ariana's unique connection with John, a bond she hadn't formed with anyone outside their family. Clutching her teddy bear, Ariana stayed close to John, who could sense her emotions. He pondered if her condition resembled the Longbottoms, who had become emotionally withdrawn after enduring the Cruciatus curse. Though not as severe, Ariana's vulnerability stemmed from a profound trauma. Observing their interaction, Al's fondness for John grew. John, perceiving Al's thoughts, calmly asked, "Do you wish to escape this place?" Al hesitated before shaking his head. "No, I just—" "A gifted wizard like you," John interjected, his gaze piercing, "is constrained by your sister's needs. You must feel trapped." Al fell silent, his inner turmoil exposed. Indeed, the invisibility cloak's purpose was to offer an escape, but from what or whom? Suddenly, Ariana's grip tightened on John's wand, her silhouette blurred by fear. John activated a soothing spell, "There's more," his voice imbued with a calming magic. "The night holds no terror," he assured her, her anxiety gradually easing. Al, astonished, inquired, "What did you do?" "A simple spell," John replied gently, "to make her feel secure." Al observed closely as Ariana clutched the wand's tip, her fear subsiding as if crossing a safe bridge. Night fell, and Ariana quickly succumbed to sleep, her fears allayed before 8 o'clock. With her at peace, the three set out on their adventure. Al, Gale, and John meandered along the path lined with marigolds, leading to the cemetery behind Godric's Hollow. A century ago, the village's entertainment was limited to drinking in bars or finding a spot to sleep under the stars. The village lay in quietude, with the moon and stars seldom making an appearance. Circling the church, they arrived at the cemetery, where disorganized vegetation clung to the rusty fence, creating a labyrinth of tombstones of varying heights. In years to come, a couple would find their final resting place here, their lives claimed by a fleeting green light that left behind a legacy of powerful magic. The trio's presence did little to disturb the solemn tranquility of the cemetery. As they walked, a sense of reverence filled the air. "Dead people can't be resurrected," Al murmured, reading the inscription on a tombstone. "Where the treasure is, the heart is also." He paused, recognizing the name, Kendra Dumbledore. Gale, usually brash and unrestrained, softened his demeanor, paying his respects to the tombstone's occupant. "Someone you know?" John inquired, his poor eyesight preventing him from reading the inscription. Al replied softly, "It's my mother. She passed away not long ago." A wave of sorrow enveloped them. "Peace be with her," John offered, acknowledging the inevitability of death. He conjured a bouquet of white flowers, placing it in front of the tombstone. Al knelt, gently tracing the marble with his fingers, while Gale stood by, his usual ambition replaced with the sincerity of friendship. After a moment, Al rose, the weight of his mother's death and the responsibility it brought heavy on his shoulders. A newfound determination for the invisibility cloak ignited within him. "Let's go," he said, his resolve clear. Gale, understanding the unspoken bond between them, nodded. Their shared glance made John feel like an outsider. "I think we can go there," John suggested, eager to move on. Gale led them deeper into the cemetery, where they encountered the tombstone of Ignotus Peverell. The realization that a character from legend was real struck them profoundly. "We can find the invisibility cloak," Gale stated, his purpose in Godric's Hollow clear. John, however, was skeptical. "No, you won't," he said confidently, knowing the cloak had been passed down through the Potter family. Disinterested in the legend, he found the pursuit unexciting. Gale's disappointment was palpable, but John remained unmoved. Casting a spell on the tombstone, John concluded, "This is a very ordinary tomb, as humble as its owner." The revelation that the cloak was not there dashed their hopes. Looking up at the night sky, John remarked on its beauty, finding some solace in the night's tranquility. Gale and Al shared a look of disappointment, their hopes dashed yet again. As time passed, Gale began to include John in his and Al's activities more frequently, discussing magic and learning from one another. John sensed Gale's ulterior motive, possibly seeking knowledge like the Goublai fairy fire. Despite his reservations about interfering too much in this world, John found himself becoming a guardian to Ariana, navigating the complexities of their relationships and the secrets they held. Gale and Al seemed to have found a rhythm in learning from each other, leaving John with the unofficial role of looking after Ariana. She held on to John's wand tightly, finding solace in its presence. Sensing her comfort, John allowed her to keep it. The idea of using spiritual magic to heal Ariana crossed John's mind. He entertained the thought for a moment, contemplating the potential of such magic. However, he quickly dismissed it, understanding the gravity of intervening in someone's life. Altering Ariana's fate could have unforeseen consequences, potentially changing the future and the world itself. Ariana, John murmured her name, his expression a mix of emotions. The name had been a familiar one, carrying a sense of normalcy until Al's brother made his return. That moment shattered any semblance of luck John felt he had. Al's brother, with just one look, made it clear he was not to be trifled with, his temper as unpredictable as a young goat's. John's internal conflict and the dynamics within the group hinted at the complexities of their situation. Each character, with their own burdens and secrets, navigated the delicate balance of their relationships, all while the shadow of the future loomed large over them. Chapter 517, Greetings, Aberforth, Hogwarts was on its holiday break, a fact John had learned from Gale. Accompanying this news was the mention of the bothersome goat kid from the neighboring Dumbledore family. Aberforth, Albus Dumbledore's younger brother, was known for his sullen demeanor, a trait exacerbated by a past altercation involving their sister Ariana, which had led to a rift between him and Albus. Unlike his brother, Aberforth lacked the remarkable talent that Albus possessed, a fact that made Gale view him with a certain disdain, despite their closer age proximity. John, however, remained indifferent to the burgeoning friendship between Gale and Albus, his concerns lying elsewhere, primarily with healing his eyesight and finding a way back to his own time. John had theorized that by combining time magic with soul magic, he might manage to jump back. However, the intricacies of time travel, including its limitations, were still a mystery to him. He wasn't sure if the same rules that applied to time-turner travel would apply to him, given his unconventional method. The concept of a deadline loomed over him, representing the world's mechanism to detect and expel anomalies like him. The key to remaining undetected, he surmised, lay in the sands of time, a resource he, metaphorically speaking, hadn't purchased a ticket to access. Upon administering another round of eye drops, John noticed a significant improvement. His eyes, once dry and blurry, now felt moist, and he could see clearly at close range. Encouraged by this progress, he ventured outside, deliberately avoiding leaving any historical footprint, including refusing Bathilda Bagshot's offer to photograph him. As he passed the Dumbledore residence, his attention was caught by a rose bush. It was only when he was inches away that he could appreciate the flower's details. His inspection was interrupted by a wary voice. Turning, John found himself face to face with a red-haired figure who was decidedly not Albus. Aberforth Dumbledore, upon learning John's mistaken identity for his brother, defensively introduced himself. John's attempt to clarify the confusion only led to a tense exchange, with Aberforth drawing his wand in suspicion. John's realization that he was interacting with one of the most influential figures of the time, something he had hoped to avoid, was compounded by the unexpected appearance of Ariana. Her presence outside the house, unaccompanied, was both surprising and concerning, given her condition. Aberforth's protective instinct towards his sister was evident, though his actions inadvertently caused her distress. Sensing an opportunity to ease the tension, John gently allowed Ariana to touch his wand, a gesture that seemed to comfort her. This simple act of kindness led to a moment of connection between the siblings and John, with Aberforth silently acknowledging John's calming influence on Ariana. "Hello, Aberforth," John greeted, recognizing the significance of this unexpected encounter and the potential for a new understanding between them. "My name is Joel, and I live with Aunt Bathilda." The boy next door introduced himself. "Aunt Bathilda?" Aberforth echoed, his gaze fixed on John with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. This was their first official meeting, and Aberforth couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. Ariana, his sister, seemed to have taken a liking to John, a fact that irked Aberforth since he considered himself her favorite brother. John's presence also made it challenging for Aberforth to connect with the surly proprietor of the Hogshead Tavern. "You seem quite different from when you were at school, fighting hard, yet now you run a tavern with a more subdued demeanor," John remarked, eyeing Aberforth with a hint of amusement. He hadn't spent much time at the Hogshead, and was surprised when Aberforth pointed his wand at him as he was just passing by. "Do you think being a minor exempts you from Azkaban for using magic?" "Wait, Azkaban?" John's eyes sparkled with realization. He remembered that Azkaban wasn't yet guarded by Dementors, those soul-sucking creatures. This revelation softened his view of Aberforth. "You're not lacking in brains, but you certainly provide inspiration," John said, clapping Aberforth on the shoulder. Aberforth's body stiffened, his anger boiling over like a volcano ready to erupt. He was a true Gryffindor at heart, fearless and ready to stand his ground. However, when Albus returned, he found Aberforth pinned against the wall by John, who was delivering punch after punch. Aberforth's face was bruised and swollen, and despite his stubbornness, another punch to the stomach nearly made him retch. "Just because I'm visually impaired doesn't mean I'm physically weak," John stated, releasing Aberforth, who was gasping for air, looking as if he might vomit. Ariana, witnessing her brother's beating, clutched her wand tighter. Sensing her distress, John reassured her. "I was merely sparring with your brother, right, Aberforth?" Leaning against the wall for support, Aberforth managed a pained smile and nodded, agreeing through gritted teeth. "Yes, we were just sparring." Ariana relaxed at this. John then turned his attention to Albus, the future Dumbledore, who had just returned. "Al, what do you think makes a good-looking beard?" John asked, a question that left Albus puzzled, unaware of his iconic silver beard in the years to come. Aberforth, still reeling from the altercation, accused Albus of neglecting their sister and allowing strangers too close. Albus silently endured his brother's accusations, a testament to his patience and understanding. John pondered the situation, amused by Aberforth's quick recovery from the physical altercation. The brothers' quarrel seemed to stem from a deep concern for Ariana, who, sensing the tension, had instinctively reached for John's wand. "It's okay, they're just worried about you," John assured her, his voice carrying a soothing magic that made Ariana believe in his words. John felt a complex mix of emotions towards Ariana. He knew her tragic fate and understood that even if he had the power to change her destiny, the repercussions could be dire. "You are a poor soul, Ariana," John said softly, placing a comforting hand on her head. "Suffering shows no mercy." Ariana, though not fully comprehending, felt comforted by John's warmth. As Aberforth and Albus's argument subsided, John noticed Gale's cautious observation from a distance. Gale, having spent time with Albus, recognized a shared ambition for a greater good, but also saw how family obligations hindered their potential. Gale's thoughtful demeanor suggested he was contemplating a way to take Albus away from these constraints, understanding the need for both of them to pursue their aspirations without being held back by familial duties. Gale believed that the pursuit of the greater good should not be constrained by familial ties. "Al, you should allow yourself to be selfish just this once," he urged, his heart swelling with a tumult of emotions. In that moment, he made a decisive choice. Though the quest for the Deathly Hallows remained unfulfilled, he stumbled upon a different kind of treasure. John ventured into the woods, and upon his return, he discovered a letter hidden in the attic. With a sense of anticipation, he carefully opened it and peered inside. The message was cryptic, instructing him to head to the barn, and it was signed with Gale's name. "Is this leading to a confrontation?" John pondered, his fingers tracing the contours of the letter. It dawned on him that Gale was ready to confront his own truths. They both understood the challenges the other faced. Over the course of more than a month spent together, John had come to a realization. If someone as determined as Gale managed to survive against all odds, he was bound to leave a significant mark on the world. The thought of meeting a young Dumbledore crossed his mind. Who could that person be? The answer seemed obvious to John. He sighed, feeling the weight of his involvement. I'm getting more entangled in their lives than I ever anticipated. The thought that he was playing a part in the destinies of these two individuals filled him with a mix of doubt and curiosity. Could it be that the future was already taking shape in unexpected ways? The following day, after much deliberation, John made his way to the barn. He clung to the hope that by erasing their memories, he could prevent any alteration to the future. More than anything, he was eager to hear what the young versions of these two monumental figures would say. After all, they were destined to become a future White Lord and a Dark Lord, wizards of unparalleled achievements. With a heart full of complex emotions, John stepped into the barn. There he found a mirror, and Gale was already there, waiting for him. The barn setting became a crucible for revelations and decisions that would ripple through time, involving John in a historical tapestry far beyond what he had ever imagined. Chapter 518. Hello. Ideal Gale turned slowly, his voice cutting through the silence with a question that seemed to pierce the soul. Do you want to keep going like this, Joel? He asked, implying that mediocrity was not a fitting life for a genius. The second floor of the barn was enveloped in quietude. I thought you'd wait until Al came over, Joel replied, noting the absence of their friend. He had some disputes with Aberforth, Gale said with a dismissive snort. But you haven't answered my question, Joel. Do you want to stay like this forever? Hiding? Gale's excitement was palpable as he continued. Why are we doing this? We have the power to change things. Change? Joel asked, intrigued. What exactly do you want to change? Let wizards live better, Gale exclaimed, his right hand waving frantically, causing his sleeves to flutter. Why should wizards have to hide like mice? We have the power to make a difference. You are very powerful, Joel. So powerful that I can't see through you, and that's why I need you, Gale said, his gaze intense. Join us for the greater good. Let wizards live openly in the world. Gale questioned the status quo, wondering why muggles could live openly and consume most of the resources, while powerful wizards were forced to hide like rats in a sewer. He was determined to change this, to challenge the secrecy laws. Gale's ambition was undeniable, and Joel had to admit that it was strong. However, Joel had never considered challenging the secrecy laws himself. It wasn't out of cowardice, but a recognition of the reality that wizards had only two choices, hide or be destroyed. To Joel, Gale's ambitious words were nothing more than a dream, a beautiful but unattainable fantasy. Do you know about hunters? Joel asked, steering the conversation in a different direction. Hunter? Gale was momentarily taken aback. At that moment, Al arrived at the barn, having resolved his quarrel with Aberforth. Gale had painted many beautiful visions for him, visions that brought the two young hearts together, magnifying their desires to change the world so that wizards no longer had to hide in the shadows. This ideal was intoxicating, driving them to believe that their exceptional talents could make it a reality. However, Aberforth couldn't grasp these grand visions, his concerns limited to his simple life and goats. Gale wanted Joel on board, and Al knew it. Despite their brief acquaintance, Al recognized Joel's extraordinary talent and wisdom. Gale was like a golden eagle soaring in the sky, a captivating yet poisonous flower, while Joel was akin to a fire dragon resting in the abyss, a snow mountain waiting to unleash its power. When Joel mentioned the hunter, Al pondered its significance. When a hunter walks in the forest and sees trembling bushes, his first instinct is to pull the trigger of his shotgun, Joel explained, his gaze penetrating. Muggles are the hunters. And we are the prey, he concluded, his words sending a shiver down the spines of the two talented young wizards. Muggles are weak, Gale protested. They're just ordinary people without magic. Yes, but they possess wisdom and outnumber us significantly, Joel countered. 1,000 years ago, perhaps change was possible. But now, how many wizards are there compared to billions of muggles? The vast population of muggles underscored their dominance in the world. As Joel drew his wand, A mist spread out, enveloping them in a fog that seemed to symbolize the uncertain and perilous path ahead. The cacophony of roars, explosions, and the clamor of battle filled the air. An ancient fighter jet, a relic in John's eyes, streaked across the sky, its bullets claiming dozens of lives with ease. Tanks, those steel behemoths, trundled across the battlefield, their shells capable of demolishing houses in a single blow. Bullets, faster than any spell, could end a life in an instant. To John, it was a stark reminder, whether by a curse or a bullet, death was the same. Wizards, despite their power, were as vulnerable as anyone, when faced with such force. One wizard might kill a muggle, maybe two, but it takes only 100 muggles to kill a wizard, John mused, shaking his head. He turned to the young Al, his voice tinged with a somber realization. Hogwarts was established to protect young wizards from muggle persecution, Al. From the beginning, we've been the prey, and there are far too many hunters armed with guns. The best we can do, John continued, is to keep our presence as discreet as possible, to avoid drawing the hunter's attention. The harsh reality of John's words left Al and Gale speechless, their youthful idealism clashing with the cruel truths of the world. They had spent countless nights discussing their frustrations and dreams for the future of the wizarding world, only to be confronted with the impossibility of their ideals. John's blunt dismissal of their hopes felt like a personal attack, a ruthless destruction of their dreams. Gale's eyes narrowed, a sharpness replacing his earlier cynicism. "You know all this, yet you choose not to seek change?" he challenged. "Change?" John's laugh was hoarse, filled with a bitter wisdom. "We're different, Gale." With a wave of his wand, the visions dissipated into mist. "In the end, power is what matters. I've never been concerned with the conflict between wizards and muggles. To me, they're all just people. Only the strong can claim their place in this world." John's philosophy struck a chord with the young wizards. His belief in the supremacy of power, his dismissal of the distinctions between wizard and muggle, revealed a Slytherin pragmatism that was both alarming and compelling. John had never been defeated. His life was a testament to the belief that might makes right. Gale found himself echoing John's sentiment. Power comes first. With enough power, one could indeed change the world, force muggles to acknowledge wizardkind. But such power required more than just one individual. It required a following, a movement. In that moment, Gale's resolve hardened. Despite knowing the dangers, he was willing to risk everything for the chance to prove himself, to see if he could be the lion rather than the rabbit. The allure of the Deathly Hallows, symbols of ultimate power, beckoned. Al, too, was moved by a sense of duty and the weight of his family's legacy. The desire for adventure, for a life unbound by fear, pulsed strongly within him. He was a Gryffindor through and through, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. Together they faced the metaphorical mountain that John had laid before them. It was daunting, suffocating even, but it also brought them closer, united in their determination to overcome it. "Join us, John," Gale implored, his belief unwavering. "Let's be the ones who emerge victorious." Fate, like a storm, whispered possibilities and dangers alike, but in their hearts the decision was made. Together they would face whatever came, driven by the hope of triumph and the unyielding desire to carve their own path in the world. In the face of adversity, warriors confront the tempest, their cries echoing through the shadowed world. It's a carnival of chaos, a frenzy of determination. Those who perish for their beliefs should never be scorned. Al stood by Gershon, unwavering in his support. "Let's embark on this journey together," Al proposed. They sought to rally others, to amplify their call to arms. They aimed to make the wizards acknowledge their presence and the hunters fear the whispers in the underbrush. However, their assumptions about John were fundamentally flawed. John was not one to simply endure the storm. He was the storm incarnate. "We are fated to walk different paths," John declared, shaking his head. "After nearly a century, what makes you think I'd join your frenzy?" His gaze fixed on Al, he posed a question that seemed to pierce the soul. "Are you planning to flee, Al?" Al was taken aback, confusion written all over his face. John's serene tone belied the devastating impact of his words. "Your sister, your family," he continued, his words striking a chord of panic within Al. "You chose the invisibility cloak, the path of escape." John's insight into the human heart was like a tempest, tearing through Al's defenses. "Confront your true self, Al." With those parting words, John walked away, his voice trailing behind him. "It was Gale who handed you the key, offering you a way to break free from your family's chains and the suffocating responsibilities. But what about the desires of your heart?" John's departure left a profound silence in its wake, forcing Al to confront the uncomfortable truths about his choices and the illusions of freedom he had clung to. The realization that his escape was not as liberating as he had believed it to be weighed heavily on him, challenging him to reassess his path and the true meaning of courage and loyalty in the face of an uncertain future. Chapter 519. Hello, Duel. John wiped the cold sweat from his brow after exiting the barn, a sense of relief washing over him. "I almost caused harm to 2 young wizards by accident," he mused, reflecting on the close call. He had nearly overwhelmed Al and Gale with his power, but fortunately he managed to regain control in time. The incident left him puzzled, though. What were they doing in the barn, he wondered, unaware that his departure had plunged young Al into a whirlpool of confusion. In the courtyard, John spotted a figure with her hands over her ears. It was Ariana, seemingly trying to block out the world around her. John's feelings toward Ariana were complex, especially knowing the tragic fate that awaited her. Being an obscurial made her one of the most dangerous wizards, not by choice, but by the uncontrollable magic within her. The magic that tormented her, and the fear of harming others, kept her confined and isolated, a fate no one deserved. "What are you doing here?" John asked, his voice laced with a mixture of helplessness and concern. The recent quarrel between her brothers had frightened Ariana, driving her to seek solace in the courtyard. Despite her young age, she seemed to understand that she was the inadvertent cause of their disputes. Noticing Ariana's distress, John approached her gently. He picked up a bear cub toy from the ground, dusted it off with care, and handed it back to her. Ariana accepted the toy, her expression one of silent gratitude. She then offered John an unbloomed flower, a gesture that seemed to carry all the innocence and purity of her troubled heart. "Give you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. John was touched by the gesture. Instead of taking the flower directly, he placed his palm beneath it, and under his gentle influence, the flower bloomed beautifully in Ariana's hands. Her eyes widened in wonder at the sight. "Very beautiful," John said with a smile. "Thank you, Ariana. I cherish this gift." Ariana's face lit up with a smile, a rare moment of joy for the girl whose life was overshadowed by fear and isolation. John carefully placed the flower on his chest, its white petals pure and unblemished. Turning around, John caught Aberforth's wary gaze. Despite his rough exterior and temper, Aberforth was fiercely protective of his sister. "Aberforth, how's your painting coming along?" John inquired, attempting to engage him in conversation. Aberforth, caught off guard, grumbled, "What's it to you?" "Fair enough," John conceded with a nod. As John walked away, he noticed Aberforth huddled in the courtyard, his expression one of discomfort, while Ariana sat beside him, poking at a fallen wand with concern. It was clear that despite Aberforth's gruff demeanor, he and Ariana shared a deep bond, communicated through his drawings and their shared moments of tenderness. Reflecting on his encounters with the Dumbledore siblings, John couldn't help but compare them to others he knew. Suddenly, "Draco doesn't seem so annoying," he mused, appreciating the complexities of the relationships he observed. Aberforth's talent for drawing, a surprising discovery, served as a poignant reminder of the unique ways in which people express their love and care for one another. In the weeks following their meeting in the barn, Gale and Al continued their attempts to recruit John to their team, undeterred by his refusals. Their persistence turned their interactions into a playful game, with John skillfully evading their attempts to photograph him. Amidst these interactions, John's vision had gradually improved, allowing him to see people within a meter's distance, though his world remained devoid of color. On this particular day, the atmosphere felt unusually charged, hinting at the unfolding of significant events. The atmosphere was serene, yet Gale and Al were conspicuously absent, seemingly engrossed in their secretive plans. Bathilda, on the other hand, was engaged in her usual routine, releasing an owl into the sky. She often accepted interviews from newspapers, a P practice that had become her primary source of income. While effective, this method posed a significant dilemma for John, whose ambitions stretched far beyond financial gain. He harbored a desire to venture to Azkaban in pursuit of Dementors, intending to use them as materials for his experiments. During his stay, John became acquainted with Ariana, whose presence brought a semblance of tranquility amidst the frequent disputes between Aberforth and Albus. Ariana, in her vulnerability, grew increasingly attached to John, her demeanor reminiscent of a kitten fearful of abandonment. One day, by the stream, John, attempting to adjust his vision, revealed the limitations of his sight to Ariana. "Unfortunately, I can't see clearly," he admitted with a sigh, acknowledging the duration of his stay. Ariana, clutching a bear in one hand and her wand in the other, looked at John with concern. "Maybe, you don't know, Ariana, but I'm not from here," John confided, hinting at his impending departure. He planned to leave for Azkaban to procure Dementors for his soul potion research. "You'd better learn to express yourself," he advised, presenting her with a white flower as a symbol of equivalent exchange. Ariana accepted the flower with a gentle touch, her face lighting up with a bright smile. This gesture marked a turning point in their relationship, opening her heart slightly more to John. She adorned her hair with the flower, seeking his approval with an inquisitive gaze. John responded by creating a garland of white flowers with a wave of his wand, wishing her pleasant dreams. However, when John extended his wand to her, Ariana chose to grasp his finger instead, her eyes filled with reluctance. She didn't want him to leave. "Let me be your eyes," she offered, aware of his vision problems but unwilling to part ways. John was touched by her kindness, but recognized the necessity of letting her go. As they approached the door, Aberforth awaited them. Noticing Ariana's smile, he was momentarily taken aback, having not seen such joy in his sister for a long time. Ariana hesitated before releasing John's hand and running towards the house, a house that would ultimately lead to her demise. Aberforth, grateful for John's influence on Ariana, thanked him, albeit with a hint of suspicion regarding John's intentions. John, left standing outside, bid farewell to Ariana through the window before returning to Bathilda's house. There, he found Gale, now revealed as Gellert Grindelwald, preparing to leave. Grindelwald extended an invitation to John, urging him to join their cause to revolutionize the wizarding world and promote fairness among wizards. Despite recognizing Grindelwald's identity and the gravity of his proposition, John declined, expressing a belief in a future beyond Grindelwald's vision. As Grindelwald struggled to comprehend John's cryptic refusal, it became clear that their paths were destined to diverge. John's rejection of Grindelwald's final plea underscored his commitment to a different path, one not swayed by the allure of changing the world through force or ambition. Aberforth's emotions fluctuated wildly as he left Bathilda's house, his thoughts consumed by the conversation he had overheard. "Let's go together, Al," Gale had said, his voice filled with a sense of urgency and camaraderie. "Bring your sister. We can protect her and keep her hidden." In the privacy of Al's room, the two young wizards meticulously planned their departure. Aberforth had gently put his sister to sleep, carefully placing an enchanted wreath upon her head that seemed to defy the laws of nature by remaining pristine and uncrumpled. As he lingered outside Al's door, the snippets of conversation he caught were enough to send a surge of panic through him. It wasn't just another late-night exchange of grandiose dreams and fantasies. They were planning to leave. The realization hit Aberforth like a physical blow, sending a hot rush of blood to his head. He wants to leave? He repeated to himself, his voice barely above a whisper, as disbelief too reneged into anger. The thought of his own brother wanting to abandon everything they knew filled him with a sense of betrayal. Fueled by rage, Aberforth burst into the room. "You've stolen my brother, and now you want to take my poor sister too?" he accused, his voice shaking with anger. Drawing his wand was a reflex, but this time his intent was deadly serious. He aimed it at Gellert Grindelwald, the blonde stranger who had brought turmoil into their lives. "Do you really want to duel with me?" Gale responded, his voice icy with impatience. "You're not ready for the consequences." "No, Aberforth, put down your wand," Al pleaded, trying to defuse the situation, but Aberforth was beyond reason. "No, I'll handle this myself," he declared, his determination unwavering. "Don't stop him, Al. He needs to learn from defeat," Gale countered, a dangerous glint in his eye. The room was suddenly illuminated by the glow of spells being cast, marking the beginning of an inevitable confrontation. Aberforth, fueled by anger, launched the first strike. Gale's skilled counterattacks forced Aberforth to retreat, but Al intervened, trying to protect his brother and restrain Gale at the same time. In the midst of their battle, the door swung open. Ariana, clutching her teddy bear and wearing the beautiful wreath, stood at the threshold. The sight of her brothers locked in combat was too much for her to bear. This time, she chose to confront the situation, her presence a silent plea for peace, as she sought to express her own turmoil and emotions. Chapter 520. Hello, Crooked Nose. No one could have anticipated Ariana's sudden entrance. At this hour, she was expected to be sound asleep. Perhaps it was fate, or perhaps the excitement from a newly received gift kept her awake. Inside the room, a fierce duel was unfolding. Al, a prodigious wizard from Hogwarts, faced off against Gale, who had been expelled from Durmstrang due to his controversial experiments. Although Aberforth might seem unremarkable compared to his brother, he was nonetheless a top-tier student at Hogwarts. The three wizards were locked in combat within the cramped space, spells whizzing past in a dangerous dance. Al, adept in transfiguration, was not only defending himself but also striving to protect his younger brother. With a swift motion of his wand, a puppet sprang from its box, attempting to intervene. Aberforth, fueled by anger, unleashed increasingly powerful spells, much to Gale's irritation. Gale managed to deflect Aberforth's attack and retaliated with a shattering spell, which Al countered by manipulating the puppet. The puppet, beloved by Ariana, was destroyed in the process. Aberforth, undeterred, cast a spell that made Al's nose bleed. Seeing Al injured, Gale abandoned his restraint. Aberforth, now clearly outmatched, cast spells in desperation, only to have them deflected. Gale then cast a jinx that sent Aberforth tumbling to the ground. Amidst the chaos, Al continued to shield his brother, deflecting spells with uncertain origins. Ariana, gathering her courage, approached her brothers, hoping to seize their wands, as she had done earlier in the day, believing it might halt their quarrel. It was at this moment that the duel reached its climax. An impatient Gale unleashed a powerful spell, met with equal force by Aberforth, compelling Al to join the fray. The collision of their three spells ignited a blinding explosion. Ariana, caught in the blast, dropped her bear as she fell. The white garland she wore scattered, its pure white flowers raining down upon the scarred floor, with a single petal landing in her hair. Time seemed to freeze. The three brothers turned their gaze to Ariana, now entangled in their conflict. "Ariana!" Aberforth cried out in despair, dropping his wand and rushing to her side. But it was too late. Ariana looked up at her brother, reaching for the white flower on his shoulder, flowers she had picked herself, holding them as if they were precious treasures. "Brother," Ariana whispered, her voice barely audible. For the first time in a long while she smiled, a fragile gesture in the face of death. That white flower would never see its bloom. Aberforth, heartbroken, repeated Ariana's name, hoping for a response that never came. Al stood frozen, overwhelmed by the gravity of the moment. He turned to Gale, who was equally shocked by the turn of events. "Leave with me, Al," Gale urged, sensing the urgency. Al remained motionless, his decision clear. Understanding Al's resolve, Gale fled, leaving the Dumbledore home and Godric's Hollow behind. The question of who was to blame became irrelevant. Al was bound by the events of that day, a burden he would carry for the rest of his life. Gale's departure left behind an unsolvable mystery. The night was silent. Bathilda Bagshot sat in her rocking chair, lost in thought. "Are you leaving?" she asked, noticing John descending the stairs. "Yes, ma'am," John replied respectfully, turning to face the elderly woman. "I believe it's time for me to go. Hogwarts will be starting soon." "That's still a month away," Bathilda murmured, her voice tinged with sadness. John smiled, stepping closer to ensure he would remember the old woman's face. "These past 2 months have been very interesting," he said, leaning down to brush a silver strand of hair from her face. John gently placed his hand behind Bathilda's ears, whispering softly, "I think we'll meet again later, but first, you must forget me." As he uttered the word "obliviate," a white light flashed before Bathilda's eyes, erasing all memories of the white-haired boy from her mind. She blinked, coming back to her senses with a puzzled expression, feeling as though something was amiss. The old woman, slightly confused and drowsy, slowly closed her eyes, not noticing the extra blanket that had appeared over her. As John stepped out of Bathilda's house, he paused to glance back at the dark, silent building. It seemed unnecessary to leave a candle burning for an old woman whose temporary guest had departed. Suddenly, he sensed magical disturbances emanating from a neighboring house. Was there a fight? A sense of sadness washed over him as he stood frozen outside, grappling with the realization that Grindelwald had escaped Godric's Hollow, leaving behind shattered dreams and unchangeable fates. Ariana could not escape hers, and the storm that had started years ago had finally ceased, leaving only sorrow in its wake. Ariana's funeral was a somber affair, attended by few. Her brothers stood by the grave, a new tombstone next to their mother's. Aberforth had only one thing to say to Albus the night before. "I hate you, and so did Ariana." These words left a deep, unhealable wound in Albus's heart, a reminder of the tragedy he had inadvertently caused. As he reached out to touch the pristine tombstone, Aberforth, in a fit of rage, struck him, causing his nose to bleed. Without a word, Albus silently wiped away the blood, the rain beginning to fall heavily around them. John watched from a distance, his presence unnoticed as he observed the grieving brothers through the rain. Approaching them, he spoke to Albus, his words cutting deep. "Your evasion created your first regret." Albus was forced to confront the truth that his desire for freedom and recognition had led to this tragedy. John's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the emotional turmoil Albus felt, realizing his selfishness had contributed to his sister's fate. Without hesitation, John confronted Aberforth, pushing him aside with a forceful kick. He then turned his attention to Albus, challenging him to a duel under the guise of teaching him a lesson. As John prepared to cast another spell, the tension between the two men was palpable, each aware of the significant lesson about to be imparted. Al's brother's life hung in the balance, igniting a fire within him that he thought had long been extinguished. With newfound determination, he rose to his feet, his wand firmly in hand, and unleashed a spell towards John. However, with a casual flick of his wand, John deflected the spell with ease, causing it to ricochet harmlessly off Aberforth's boots. "Show me your true power," John taunted, his voice dripping with challenge. "Let's see if you truly believe you can change the world." Gritting his teeth, Al summoned all his strength and launched another spell at John. Yet each attempt was effortlessly blocked, as if John were merely swatting away an annoying fly. In a bold move, Al turned to Transfiguration, morphing a nearby tombstone into a ferocious dog. But John, ever the formidable opponent, countered by transforming the dog into a harmless creature that Al's spell easily overpowered. The battle raged on, with John parrying each of Al's attacks with the grace of a seasoned duelist. He wielded his wand with one hand while nonchalantly holding an umbrella in the other, as if to mock the futility of Al's efforts. It was clear that John was in a league of his own, effortlessly outmatching Al at every turn. In a final, desperate attempt, Al unleashed a powerful spell, only for John to counter with a blinding ray of silver light. The spell struck Al with such force that it left a deep, bloody gash across his face, the pain searing through him as blood mingled with the rain. John looked down at Al with cold indifference, his words cutting deeper than any spell. "You can't change anything, Dumbledore." Defeated and broken, Al collapsed to his knees, his wand slipping from his grasp and clattering to the ground. A profound sense of powerlessness washed over him, a feeling of insignificance that he had never experienced before. "I am insignificant," he whispered to himself. As if to add insult to injury, John's voice broke through Al's despair. "By the way, I remember your nose being crooked." Before Al could react, John's fist, magnified in his blurred vision, came crashing down. The impact sent Al flying backward, the sound of his nose breaking echoing in his ears. In that moment, Al realized the harsh truth of his limitations, the weight of his defeat pressing down on him like a physical burden.